Chapter 842. Under the shade of a tree, Qing Yuan and Hong Wuan looked at each other and saw the helplessness in each other's eyes. Xianzhe landed in front of them and asked, "Is Her Majesty not out yet?" They shook their heads. "If Her Majesty comes out, tell her that the Great Elder is here to see her," Xianzhe said faintly and turned to look in the direction of the bedroom. At this time, everyone was outside the bedroom, and they could only see the upper half of the bedroom through the wall. If they listened carefully, they could hear some sounds coming from there. It had been 3 days. The two had been in the bedroom for 3 days. It took so long to consummate the marriage. Xianzhe began to be curious about what they were doing inside. The food that was delivered for the past 2 days was placed in the sect, but it was brought back in its original condition. Qing Yuan muttered, "With Her Majesty's strength, it won't affect her even if she doesn't eat for a few days," Xianzhe said faintly. Without thinking further, she turned and walked outside. "I'll inform the Great Elder." However, before she walked 100 meters, she heard a loud noise behind her. Xianzhe turned around and was shocked. The roof of the bedroom was gone. Their original positions were shrouded in dust that soared into the sky. The loud noise caused the entire palace to be in chaos. Xianzhe rushed to the bedroom in a few steps, but it was already completely covered in dust, and she couldn't see what was going on inside. "Great Commander!" Qing Yuan and Hong Wuan opened their mouths wide and panicked. They finally found their backbone when they saw Xianzhe. "Quickly save Her Majesty." Xianzhe didn't even look at them and said, "This won't hurt Her Majesty." She then raised her voice and said, "Everyone, don't panic." After stabilizing the situation, she slapped forward with her palm. With a piercing sound, a hole appeared in the dust in front of her, but it was quickly filled by the surrounding dust. Seeing that this method didn't work, Xianzhe pondered for a while and rushed inside. "Retreat." The Empress's voice suddenly came from the dust, causing Xianzhe to stop. The Empress's voice continued, "Call the people from the clinic over." "Your Majesty, are you injured?" Xianzhe was surprised. "It's not me. Go quickly." The Empress's voice carried a tinge of tiredness and an indescribable feeling. Knowing that it wasn't the Empress who was injured, Xianzhe felt at ease and cupped her hands in the direction of the Empress's voice. She didn't care if the Empress could see her, as this had long become a habit. Then he retreated and sent someone to inform the doctors. Just as Xianzhe left, a red shadow pierced through the dust and disappeared into a side hall at the side. At the same time, a voice came from afar. "No one is allowed to come near. Qing Yuan and Hong Wuan, bring the clothes for me and Zhao Prince Consort over." Qing Yuan and Hong Wuan stuck out their tongues. The Empress's favorite clothes were all buried in her bedroom. Fortunately, there were people in charge of clothes in the palace. They split up to retrieve undergarments and red muslin, as well as Pingle Park to retrieve Rinpoche's clothes. At the same time, he also asked the Imperial Kitchen to make some food. Meat a lot. They felt that Her Majesty and Rinpoche were probably hungry. It wasn't should, it was definitely. The two did not leave the house for 3 days. When they arrived at the side hall, they blushed when they recalled the sounds and things that happened in the hall for the past 3 days. As soon as they entered the side hall, they saw the Empress sitting there wrapped in a red cloth. The whip on her head had long been untied and was hanging down in strands. There seemed to be water stains and some dust on it. The red cloth that the Empress was wearing couldn't be considered clean either, as water stains and dust were mixed together. She looked a little disheveled, but when they looked up at the Empress, they realized that she seemed a little different. There seemed to be an additional layer of luster on her skin, and there was a tinge of redness in her fair complexion. Zhao Prince Consort was lying beside the Empress with only a torn piece of red cloth covering his lower body. They were shocked when they saw Zhao Prince Consort. Zhao Prince Consort's face was pale, and he had lost a lot of weight. "Zhao Prince Consort, they subconsciously mumbled. "It's nothing serious," the Empress said faintly as her face blushed again. At this time, Rinpoche seemed to have lost a lot of weight, but his body was fine and even better than before. However, just now, Did she seem to have broken his hip bone? Then he fainted. It was unintentional. Her mind was blank at that time. They didn't dare to ask any more questions and put the clothes aside before asking. Your Majesty, do you want me to prepare some food and a bath? Get someone to prepare and leave. Bring the people from the doctor's office over. The Empress said without looking up. After they left, she placed her hand on Runbachian's face and ran a finger from his cheek to his chin, then to his chest. She didn't know what kind of expression she should make when she thought about the craziness of the past few days. Most of the time, she didn't even know what she was doing. It's all this guy's fault, the Empress muttered. It was like this. After a while, someone from the doctor's office arrived. It was the chief of the clinic. Without hesitation, he checked Rinbachian's physical condition and reported, Zhao Prince Consort has a fracture caused by an external impact. This is easy to deal with. In addition, he has a lack of essence blood and an empty sea of marrow. I heard that your Majesty and Zhao Prince Consort haven't left the palace for 3 days, so you have to take care of your health. However, it's strange that people with a lack of essence blood should be dispirited and listless, but I see that Zhao Prince Consort's body is full of vitality and is even better than before. This vitality seems to be pouring in from the outside. The doctor said thoughtfully, could this be the legendary dual cultivation method? When I was traveling in the Nation, I heard about the coexistence of yin and yang. The dual cultivation method complements yin and yang, especially for the first time. With your Majesty's strength, if it is poured into Zhao Prince Consort's body, the Empress's face was as red as blood. This person in front of her was full of nonsense. If he was Tong Jinya or Qin Chuan, she would have killed him right now. She hurriedly said, cure him and wake him up. After saying this, she fled, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. The Empress felt that she had never been in such a sorry state in her life. A moment later, the Empress was soaking in the pool. The redness on her face hadn't dissipated, and her head was covered with flowers, qi, and energy. Go to Hongwuan and keep an eye on Zhao Prince Consort. Inform me when he wakes up. After Hongwuan left, the Empress closed her eyes in the pool. The feelings from the past few days hadn't dissipated, and her mind was in a mess. Qin Yuan knelt behind the Empress and massaged her shoulders as she said softly, Your Majesty, great elder requests to see you before noon. I got it. Since that night, how much time has passed? The Empress asked with her eyes closed. Your Majesty, it has been 3 days, Qin Yuan said softly. Then, she felt the Empress's body stiffen. 3 days? The Empress opened her eyes and asked subconsciously. So much time had passed. At that time, although she could see the light from outside the hall, she had lost all sense of time. Just as Chun Baokuan had said, 3 days had passed. However, her mind was focused on other things just now and didn't pay much attention to this. Yes, the Empress thought about how those old fellows would laugh at her for not leaving the palace for 3 days with that fellow. Immediately, she was covered with flowers, qi, and qi. Chapter 843. In the darkness, it was like the universe. In the distance, there was a star that emitted light and heat. Although he knew that he couldn't look at the star directly, Rinbachian didn't feel dazzled when he looked at it. The light only made him feel warm. At this time, Rinbachian didn't even have a body, so he didn't know what senses he was using to look at the star. This was his sea of knowledge, and the way he saw things probably depended entirely on his own habits. He was used to seeing things with his eyes, so even without a body, the angle of observation in his sea of knowledge was still a pair of non-existent eyes. This thought popped up in Rinbachian's mind. Then, he began to wonder why he was here, and he recalled what happened before. The Empress was drenched in sweat. At first, he and the Empress were completely driven by desire, but after reason emerged, he began to use the dual cultivation technique that Librarian Lin gave him. Essence, qi, and spirit were completely connected to the Empress. Then they cycled from his body to the Empress's body and back again. Each cycle would take something from his body and bring something back from the Empress's body at the same time. After an unknown period of time, the cycle became faster and faster. Then his hip bone was broken, and he fainted. Realizing this problem, Ren Bachien wanted to facepalm. Damn, what a great humiliation. Breaking my hip bone on the night of our wedding night. Can I still be human? I have a huge physique of 120 kilograms. I have the strength of a bear and the physique of a bear. Well, in front of the Empress, a bear has become a panda, and a small panda. After struggling for a while, Ren Bachien suddenly noticed that there were a few more things around him. Around him, there were 3 planets that were orbiting in a fixed orbit. One of them was khaki, one was red, and the last one was half aqua blue. White, green, and khaki were mixed together, modeled on it. It's finally formed. Ren Bachien immediately put aside the matter that he was too ashamed to talk about and focused all his attention on these 3 planets. When he focused on a planet, the distance between the planet and it would become smaller and larger in his field of vision. In other words, he was pulled closer to the planet. What attracted him the most was naturally the planet with blue, white, green, and khaki colors. The earthy yellow and red planets were missing something, and this one was obviously closer to Earth, which made him subconsciously think of a question. Will there be creatures here? If living creatures appeared in his sea of consciousness, then what were these living creatures? As soon as this thought popped up in his mind, he tossed it aside. The sea of consciousness could have the universe and even planets. It could also have rocks, wood, flames, and oceans. However, it was impossible for life to exist, because his sea of consciousness lacked the most important thing, the soul. Of course, those stones, wood, and flames were completely constructed in the sea of consciousness. They had the same form as the real world, but they were not the same essence. In essence, these things could be said to be made up of his divine sense, not the molecules, atoms, and particles of reality. However, he could use his divine sense to simulate inanimate objects in his sea of consciousness, but he couldn't simulate living things. With these thoughts in mind, he pulled himself closer to the blue planet that occupied half of the planet's surface. Then he got bigger and bigger, and he felt like he was falling toward the planet. He skimmed over the ocean, the mountains, and finally stopped above a plain. Then he saw a living creature other than himself. The metal chain laid its body on the ground and lazily basked in the sun. From time to time, it would move its head or tail. In any case, both sides looked the same. Its entire body was exactly the same. If the metal chain was here, then there was the golden spear. As Ren Bachien was thinking about this, he seemed to see a towering peak in the distance. The golden spear had somehow become thousands of meters tall and was standing there. Ren Bachien saw these 2 fellows and then looked around. Most of the surroundings were yellow soil, and there were huge trees growing on the ground. These trees were directly composed of the wood element. As a result, there were tall trees on the newly formed planet that were as tall as the 60,000 mountains. Earth, wood, and water were all revealed in front of him. As for fire, Ren Bachien guessed that it should be underground. The same was true for metal. In addition, there were wind, ice, and desert, which were variations of the 5 elements. Everything that a planet should have was already here, except for life. However, this planet alone was already a huge surprise. It was an expected surprise. Other people carried a spring and a space with them. Who was as awesome as him, carrying a universe with them? After that, Ren Bachien began to test what he could do on this planet. I said, "Let there be mountains." Ren Bachien's voice rumbled in the sky, and the metal chain on the ground jumped up. One end of it circled 360 times, but it still couldn't find Ren Bachien's position. In Ren Bachien's field of vision, the ground was shaking and cracking as if the ground was being compressed. A mountain rose with a rumble. I said, "Let there be rivers." The ground shook again, and a huge stream of water sprayed out from a crack, gradually forming a large river. I said, "Let there be girls." The metal chain scuttled to the air near where Ren Bachien was, twisted its slender body, and seemed to be looking for Ren Bachien. Well, there really wasn't any. After that, Ren Bachien tested all kinds of things. The surrounding landscape was constantly changing, and the weather was also changing. One moment, there was a storm, and the next second, the strong wind blew away the rain clouds. The sky was clear again, and after a few minutes, it started to snow heavily. As long as Rinpoche wanted to, he could almost achieve it, except for girls. On a plain, there was a huge stone tablet with the words, 9 years of compulsory education, written on it in big, bold, and beautiful characters. That's right, I'm that outstanding. Subsequently, stone tablets were erected one after another, forming a forest of tablets. Densely packed words appeared on each stone tablet. If someone were to look at the stone tablet, they would see the words Junior High School Physics Book 1, Junior High School Physics Book 2, Junior High School Chemistry Book 1. The densely packed words were the entire content of each book. In addition to words, there were also drawings. Rinpoche had discovered the first use of this world, a library. As long as it was something that he remembered, he could record it on each stone tablet. In the future, he wouldn't have to worry about forgetting it after reading it. What was that saying again? Bugau's lighter. Light up wherever you don't know how to. From now on, my mother won't have to worry about my exams anymore. As long as he was willing, he could move all the books in the world here for him to read at any time. After tossing and turning for a long time, Rinpoche began to feel tired like a tide. Then, he flew up into the sky and got further and further away. After that, there was only darkness. Rinpoche opened his eyes. This was the feeling of regaining control of his body. He was in reality and not in his mind. Zhao Prince Consort, you're awake. He heard the cheers of a young girl. Rinpoche turned his head and saw that it was Hong Wan. However, upon seeing his gaze, Hong Wan seemed to have thought of something. She blushed and ran away. Rinpoche was confused. What kind of reaction was that? Why was she blushing when he glanced at her? An old man stroked his beard and asked, Zhao Prince Consort, it's good that you're awake. Do you feel sore in your waist? Rinpoche felt it and found that it was indeed very sore. Yes, what happened? Rinpoche asked carefully. Do you feel tinnitus? The old man didn't mention it, so Rinpoche didn't realize it. After being reminded, he realized that his ears were indeed buzzing. Do you still feel dizzy? Is your body heavy? What exactly is happening to me? Your condition is already very serious. The old man's words gave Rinpoche a shock. Your waist and knees are sore, your legs are weak, your ears are ringing, and your body is emaciated. Zhao Prince Consort, your blood deficiency is very serious. Rinpoche was speechless. So your kidneys are weak. Rinpoche was immediately unhappy. Sir Chen, how can you say that? I have practiced virginity for several years, and it has just been my wedding night. How can my kidneys be weak? The old man sneered, took out a small mirror, and shone it at Rinpoche. See for yourself. When Rinpoche saw the person in the mirror, he was shocked. Was this him? Chapter 844. After the chief of the medical bureau, Chun Baoquan, left, Rinpoche felt the condition of his body, then lay on the roof of the bed. Kidney deficiency was real, dual cultivation was real, and he had gained a lot of benefits from his body. However, these didn't interfere with each other. Although it felt weird, no one said that cultivating dual cultivation would not cause kidney deficiency, right? Cough, cough. Let's put aside the issue of kidney deficiency for now. Overall, his current physical condition wasn't too bad. Fractures were fractures, and kidney deficiency was still kidney deficiency. Putting aside the issue of kidney deficiency, he couldn't mention it as it would make him sad. Just now, he heard from Chun Baoquan that he hadn't gone out for 3 days and had gained a lot. First of all, the 3 planets in his brain had finally formed, and he didn't know if it was due to dual cultivation. Secondly, he looked like he had lost a lot of weight, and he estimated that he had lost at least 50 kilograms. However, this didn't seem to be a bad thing as his body had become much stronger. Finally, there seemed to be a lot more things in his body that were full of vitality. They were mixed with his chi and blood, constantly nourishing and changing his body while strengthening his chi and blood at the same time. It was as if he had consumed some kind of treasure. This was also the reason why his physical condition wasn't bad at all, even though he had lost nearly 50 kilograms. He just didn't understand why these treasures could replenish his chi and blood, but not his kidney deficiency. However, he felt that after digesting all these things that were full of vitality in his body, his cultivation level would increase by a notch. While Rinpoche was pondering, the Empress appeared in the room. It wasn't until he stopped thinking that he realized that the Empress was staring at him. "Your Majesty, when did you come?" The Empress's gaze drifted away unconsciously. Although she had gone through 3 days of madness, she didn't dare to look at him directly after waking up. Although the two of them were officially husband and wife in every aspect, she still needed some time to adapt to such a change. "You're awake? How do you feel?" It would have been better if the Empress didn't mention this, but when she opened her mouth, Rinpoche's face fell. "Your Majesty, you have to take responsibility." The Empress was speechless. "My back hurts. My hip hurts. Your Majesty," at that time, "shut up." The Water Empress's face turned red. Her hand trembled, and she almost slapped him. "It has already been 3 days since the day of the wedding. I don't know what the outside world is thinking. How do you expect me to face the entire imperial court?" The Empress didn't allow him to say anything, but she couldn't help but speak up. There was a tinge of complaint in her voice. "Do you want me to testify for Her Majesty?" Rinpoche immediately suggested. "What evidence?" The Empress said subconsciously. When she saw the mischievous look on Rinpoche's face, she knew that he was teasing her and slapped his arm. Crack! Rinpoche, the Empress, it broke again. Rinpoche was speechless. Currently, he had achieved small success in the yang boosting technique and was well-versed in the horizontal training technique. This wife, when he thought about the 3 days of madness, he immediately felt that it was worth it. "Call the doctor over." The Empress covered her head with one hand and called out to Hong Wan, who was outside. Rinpoche didn't feel that it was a big deal, even though his arm was broken. In fact, his coma didn't have much to do with his hip bone breaking. Instead, it was caused by this substance that was full of vitality that the Empress brought back from her body and rushed into his body. "By the way, Your Majesty, how are you feeling?" "There seems to be a lot of things in my body now." Rinpoche suddenly thought about the vitality that flowed from the Empress's body to his body and wondered if she would be affected. The Empress immediately understood what he meant. She calmed herself down and tried to sound as indifferent as possible before saying, "Don't worry about me. My cultivation level is growing too fast, and sometimes it's hard for me to control it. Now it's much more stable. This dual cultivation technique is also of some use to me. When I'm injured, let's fight for another 300 rounds." Rinpoche laughed. The Empress blushed at first. Then, she seemed to have thought of something and cast aside her shyness. She glanced at him coquettishly and asked, "Can you?" Rinpoche flew into a rage. "Even though I have a weak kidney. Forget it, can we not talk about this?" The medicine in this world had miraculous effects. After resting for a night, Rinpoche was able to limp out with the help of a walking stick, even though he still couldn't jump around. He was shocked when he passed by the Empress's bedroom. Were things that intense between him and the Empress at that time? Even the bedroom had collapsed. The Empress's face was black when she returned from court. She thought about how many ministers took turns to advise her to control herself as an emperor and not to be greedy for sex. This made her a little mad. Those people were now hanging from the top of the palace walls. From General Hong Wu to the 6 ministers, they were hanging in a row. It was a spectacular sight. It was obvious how angry the Empress was at that time. Furthermore, Great Elder Shi Qing's smiling expression made the Empress even more furious. The Empress was seriously considering whether she and Rinpoche should practice dual cultivation technique for another 3 days. Sometimes the Empress would throw a little tantrum. Seeing Rinpoche in a daze outside the ruins of the bedroom, the Empress's anger dissipated a lot. She felt that no matter how angry she was sometimes, her mood would improve after seeing someone. However, Rinpoche's first sentence put her in a bad mood again. Your Majesty, was the battle that intense at that time? Rinpoche pointed at the ruins of the bedroom in amazement with an expression that said, Your Majesty, you are amazing. Qin Yuan and Hong Yuan looked at Rinpoche awkwardly and didn't know whether to laugh or do something. The Empress immediately raised her eyebrows. In my opinion, this matter isn't simple. This palace was left behind by the Han nation. Could there be some kind of secret chamber or treasure vault below that caused the hole below and caused the sudden collapse? Rinpoche's tone changed, and the Empress couldn't even vent her anger. In fact, what Rinpoche said was true. Just now, he looked around the ruins and felt that many places had caved in. Based on the situation at that time, this was simply impossible, unless there was a part below that was hollow. However, this palace had been in the hands of the Aboriginals for more than 70 years, and they actually didn't discover the secrets below. The things below the palace of the Han nation were hidden very deeply. Hearing Rinpoche say this, the Empress was slightly surprised. Yesterday, when she thought about how the main hall was collapsed by the two of them, she felt as if her face was on fire. How could she come over to check? Qin Yuan and Hong Yuan had been circling around the Empress. The other guards were far away, so naturally, they didn't discover this secret. After hearing Rinpoche's words, the Empress flashed to the ruins to check. Although she didn't know much about civil construction, she immediately found something wrong with this hint. Inform the people to dig this up, the Empress immediately ordered. Chapter 845. The guards in the palace were all at the Kismet heaven level and could lift more than 1,000 kilograms of force with just a lift of their hands. They could almost be used as human excavators, and the ruins of the palace were quickly cleaned up. The broken wooden pillars and the long stones used to build the palace were thrown aside by two people standing on either side. The only troublesome thing was the broken tiles, which were the most time-consuming to clean up. When Rinpoche went to court the next morning energetically, the ruins were still being cleaned up. In the past, whenever Rinpoche wanted to attend court, he would first wait outside the palace and attend court with everyone else. However, when he was about to leave this time, the Empress asked in surprise, It's almost time for the court meeting. Where are you going? Outside the palace. Rinpoche couldn't react. The Empress supported her chin with her fingers and looked at him with a smile. Now that your status is different and you're already a prince, you can come with me. Is that so? Rinpoche thought about it and couldn't think of anyone who had told him about this. Even in ancient China, the Empress wasn't qualified to attend court. This made his status seem special. If I say so, the Empress said casually. In any case, there was no precedent in this area. So what she said was the law. This was the first time Rinpoche followed the Empress to the morning court assembly. He was half a step behind and could see the side of the Empress's face if he tilted his head slightly. During the court assembly, the Empress's face was always filled with indifference. As he walked, Rinpoche's thoughts began to go astray. With the Empress as a precedent in Dayo and the difficulty of reproduction among the Aboriginals, there might be a female emperor in the future. In the future, he had to remember to leave a rooster to rule the court, and that princes were not allowed to interfere in court affairs. After all, not every prince was like him, who was well-versed in both literature and martial arts, and had no desire for power. What are you thinking about? The Empress suddenly asked without looking back. Rinpoche thought for a while and said, In 10 days, we will get married again on Earth. I hope there won't be any trouble. You still dare to bring up trouble? Who dares to cause trouble again? The Empress's face turned cold. The wedding was messed up by a few bastards, and she still hadn't settled the score with them. Rinpoche smiled. He wasn't afraid of anything on Earth as long as the Empress didn't cause trouble. When they were outside the hall, they could hear the clamor of the market. In any case, it didn't seem possible to expect these fellows to attend the court quietly and solemnly. It was already good enough that they didn't fight before the Empress arrived. His Majesty has arrived. Everyone finally quietened down. The Empress paused for a moment. If those people were to see Run Baqian's current appearance, she would be too ashamed to face them. However, he couldn't possibly not see anyone, right? Forget it. Gritting his teeth, he strode in a hall and walked straight to the very top before sitting down. As expected, a series of gasps could be heard behind the Empress. A few days ago, Rinpochian looked quite normal. How did he become so skinny after not seeing him for a few days? This caused many people to gasp. The Empress's eyebrows twitched a few times, but she suppressed it. There was no other way. No matter what, she had something to do with the fact that Rinpochian was so skinny. She disdained to explain herself. Of course, she couldn't explain herself either. Rinpochian landed behind the Empress. Along the way, he received gasps of cold air and winks from the crowd. When he passed by his original position, he paused for a moment, looked up, and saw Great Elder Shi Qing pointing to his side, the position closest to the Empress. The number one person below the Empress. Opposite them was the great general who supports the nation, Hongwu, who is neither arrogant nor arrogant. In fact, Rinpochian should be standing in Hongwu's position. In terms of status, Shi Qing was slightly higher than Hongwu. However, looking at Hongwu's expression, Rinpochian decided not to get close to him. Fortunately, the rules in Dao's imperial court weren't that strict. If they were strict, it couldn't be like a market every day. Rinpochian faced everyone's gaze and then sat down like an old monk. After standing there for a moment, he simply let go of his thoughts and carefully felt the current condition of his body. His body was recovering very quickly. After 2 days, the substances that were full of vitality had only decreased a little. The remaining substances mixed with his essence energy and slowly circulated and decomposed like star sand. These substances seemed to be of a higher quality than his essence energy. Not only were they gradually changing his body, but there were also traces of them being converted into essence energy. The conversion rate was at least 110. During the morning court session, Rinpochian spent almost the entire time standing there and studying the condition of his body. At noon, he went to the ruins of the palace and saw that more than half of the rubble had been cleared. He could clearly see that the stone slabs that were originally laid on the ground had sunk by more than a meter and were shattered everywhere. After another day, Rinpochian felt that his body had completely recovered. Other than losing close to 50 kilograms, there weren't any other effects. In fact, he was even better than before. This made Rinpochian feel restless again. He used to think that the pleasure in bed was limited, but with the Empress, it was exceptionally different. The feeling of the fusion of the soul and flesh, the circulation of essence energy in both of their bodies, and the feeling of being connected as one wasn't something that ordinary pleasure in bed could compare to. He couldn't forget about it. However, he still had to drink the Tamkin nourishing soup for half a month. It was said that there was a person called Li Xianyu who relied on this soup to indulge in pleasure every day. Then he died of exhaustion. There was no other way. Even a body made of iron couldn't take it. However, he obtained this soup at the age of 20 and indulged in pleasure every day until he was 30, which could be considered a miracle. The effect was indeed much better than the 6-flavor Rehmannia pill. Just as Rinpochian was preparing to recuperate in the palace for half a month, the embroidered uniform guards requested to see him. Rinpochian met them in an originally abandoned palace hall. There were 2 tall trees in front of the hall that blocked most of the windows. The hall was rather cold and gloomy, and the Empress had always disliked it. However, Rinpochian felt that it was quite suitable for a commander of secret agents to meet his subordinates. Subordinate Su Rong, Ping Tang, greets your highness. The 2 men entered the hall with their heads lowered and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. This hall made the 2 of them feel cold and gloomy. They stole a glance forward and saw a man sitting high above. His face was almost shrouded in shadows. Although the other party didn't emit any pressure, the atmosphere in this hall made the 2 of them feel pressured, and they didn't dare to act rashly. Rinpochian looked down from his seat of honor. He had some impression of Su Rong. who was currently a Qianhu in the rearguard commandery. As for Ping Tang, he was a Baihu. Rinpochian didn't know why the two of them were so anxious to see him. "Tell me, what's the matter?" Rinpochian asked while holding a cup of nourishing soup. Su Rong gave Ping Tang a look, and the latter lowered his head and recounted what he had heard at the banquet in the palace that day. After that, he kept his mouth shut. Rinpochian narrowed his eyes. Should he say that these people were audacious, or that they didn't know what was good for them? Not only were they behaving with their tails between their legs, but they even dared to spout nonsense. "Have you found out their identities?" Rinpochian asked. Su Rong replied, "Yes. One is Jiang Biabu, the second son of Jiang Huan, the warlord of Yongjiang City, and the other is Sun Qingwen, the eldest son of Sun Shi, the warlord of Wu City." After that, he added, "I also have to report to your highness that in addition to these two, there are more than 10 people who also spoke disrespectfully in private." "Well done. Give me the list of names in a while." Rinpochian nodded slightly. After all, the rearguard commandery wasn't the embroidered uniform guards or the east and west depots of China. There were only a few thousand official personnel in the rearguard commandery, and most of them were in Tianjing Basin. This time, they could even find out what the people of the Yun Nation were saying in private, which was really good. Su Rong hesitated and said, "In addition, there's another matter that involves your highness and her majesty. Even though it's disrespectful, you must know about it." "Speak." Rinpochian's expression turned cold. "This matter is about Lin Mengsheng, who has made great contributions to the Yun Nation. Rumor has it that his goal is to get close to her majesty. There is no solid evidence for this matter, and it's all private discussions among the people of the Yun Nation. I feel that I should inform your highness." Su Rong lowered his head. He thought that since this matter involved Rinpochian's status, Rinpochian would definitely be furious. However, to his surprise, Rinpochian's voice was very calm. "Got it. Give me the list of names in a while, and continue to do your own things. I will get someone to record your contributions this time." "Yes, thank you, your highness." A moment later, Rinpochian leaned on the couch and gently tapped his temple with one hand. Lin Mengsheng. This guy really had foresight and took the initiative to express his feelings to him. However, Rinpochian didn't know what he was thinking and had to be observed in the future. However, Rinpochian didn't feel that he would really be threatened by anyone. A woman like the Empress could only love one person in her life. Once she fell in love, she would never change her mind unless she let him down. He looked down at the list on the paper. The names, origins, and what they said were all in it. Rinpochian sneered. These idiots really didn't know what was good for them. He put the paper in his pocket and sat for a while before leaving the hall. The sunlight immediately shone on him, causing him to squint his eyes. He still preferred the warmth of the sun. It was much more comfortable. Chapter 846. Renli Jun had been in a good mood recently. Even when he was walking, he would hum a tune. At his age, he had long passed the age of knowing his destiny. He did not have many thoughts about the future. All he wanted was for his children to be successful, to enjoy life in old age, to be healthy, and finally, to have grandchildren. Needless to say, there was no need to worry about his two sons. He did not know how to evaluate his eldest son. Originally, he looked like an ordinary person from every angle. Even when compared to his friends, colleagues, relatives, and neighbors, he was not the kind of person who was amazing. However, starting 10 years ago, he suddenly could not understand him. Now, he was not very clear what his eldest son was doing or how many properties he had. However, he knew that his eldest son owned a 5-square-kilometer property in Wuji City, which completely belonged to him. Just this property alone could be said to be enough for him to squander in several lifetimes. Now, his eldest son could be said to be extremely envious of his relatives and friends, and they would give him a thumbs up. As for his youngest son, he was also busy with his eldest son, so he did not have to worry at all. He did not have to worry about his two sons at all. All that was left was to enjoy life and be healthy. Needless to say, having a harmonious family was a blessing, not to mention having money. As for health, ever since he started practicing the 15th set of broadcast Qigong 6 or 7 years ago. And with the herbs and food that his eldest son would send back from time to time, he had not even caught a cold these years. His body was even better than when he was young. Now, the only thing he was missing was grandchildren. Those around his age already had grandchildren. It would be a lie to say that he was not envious of them. His 2 sons were quite promising, but he didn't even have a grandchild. Because of this, he worried a lot. After waiting for so many years, his eldest son was finally going to get married. Ever since the news came back, he had not been able to close his mouth. Today, he came back from his son's new house. Although his son did not live here, he still bought a house and renovated it just for this day. Old Run, you came back from the new house again? Before entering the corridor, he met the upstairs neighbor. Usually, smoking was not allowed at home, so they all came to the corridor to smoke. They were very friendly with each other. Yeah, Ren Lijun said with a smile. When are you getting married? In a month. That's fast. Let me know if you need any help. Don't forget to come to the wedding. I won't forget. Hey, one of them is your son, right? While they were chatting, the neighbor upstairs suddenly said, even though he had only seen her twice, he would never forget her. That body was like a human bear. It was too oppressive. Ren Lijun turned his head and looked. Sure enough, there were 4 people walking over from afar. 3 of them were tall and strong like moving city walls. The last one was strong, but much thinner. Wasn't that his son? Dad, you're chatting. Ren Bachi nodded at them and smiled. You've lost weight. How did you lose so much weight? Ren Lijun felt a little distressed. His son had been thin since he was a child. It wasn't easy for him to gain weight in the past few years. The neighbor upstairs almost spat. Thin? He was 175 meters tall and weighed at least 100 kilograms. The muscles all over his body bulged, making his t-shirt look like it was about to explode. Do you have any misunderstandings about the word thin? But compared to before, he had indeed lost a lot of weight. It had degraded from a city wall to a concrete block. To lose weight, Ren Bachian replied casually. He couldn't possibly say that he was squeezed dry, right? There was no way to say that. Old Lou, let's go up. Papa Run greeted the neighbor next door and the 3-winged cavalry warriors before leading them upstairs. How long are you staying this time? I'll stay for 5 days. After that, I have to run some errands and we'll be back in 20 days. Papa Run knew that his son had a lot on his plate now and didn't mind. Where's my wife? She's too busy to leave. Come back with me when the time comes. When they entered the house, they saw that the house was filled with red. Wedding bedding, double happiness, and a bunch of other things were piled up in the living room. His mother and 2 aunts were thinking about what else they hadn't bought. Naturally, there was no more conventional greetings. This time, Rinpochian came back mainly to look at the wedding process and eliminate everything that shouldn't be there to avoid any trouble. Although the Empress said that she had a sense of propriety and etiquette, Rinpochian didn't dare to listen to her. This wedding was completely for his parents to see. He didn't plan to do much and just wanted it to be simple. The guests were also relatives and friends of his parents. Almost everything was arranged by his parents from start to finish. It was the same for the wedding planner, which was said to be quite famous locally. The next day, Rinpochian went straight to the wedding planner, got the process, sat on the sofa, and crossed out the items one by one. Change this one to bowing 3 times. Change it to a fist salute. Remove this one. Remove this one to offer tea. Remove this one where the bride promises to live in harmony with her parents-in-law. Remove this one to offer dates, peanuts, longans, and lotus seeds, and then ask the bride if she wants to give birth. Remove this one to greet parents, guests, and husband and wife. Change it to a fist salute. Remove this one about love stories and truth or dare. Remove this one about guest speaking. Remove this one about the bride and groom speaking. Remove this one about the bride pouring wine for her relatives. Rinpochian was glad that he came to take a look. There were too many minefields. Let the Empress promise to live in harmony with her parents. He put a pile of dates, peanuts, longans, and lotus seeds, and then the Empress will sit on them and ask her if she wants to give birth. He bow 90 degrees to greet parents, guests, and husband and wife. He If the Empress were to give face and bow to her parents, she would flip the table if she did anything else. What kind of game was this? Truth or dare? Each of them would write down the most mushy thing, the happiest thing, the most unforgettable thing, the most touching thing, the most favorite thing about him or her, the first kiss, and so on. While writing, the two of them had to be separated temporarily. Then, the paper would be handed to the MC, and they would have to guess what the other party would write. Asking the Empress to play this game in public? They must have lived long enough. However, it would be good to play this game in the bedroom with the Empress. He didn't know what the Empress would write. Not to mention the Empress. Even he didn't know what to write. He would play it when he got back. It seemed pretty fun. After the bride's speech, what if the Empress said, "I will grant you the title of king for generations"? Would they be afraid? Let alone asking the Empress to pour wine and light the wedding cigarettes for her relatives. Who would dare to imagine that scene? These are all goddamn minefields. One step on them, and they would die. Rinpoche wanted to laugh at the wedding planner company. However, he also knew that these wedding planner companies were dealing with normal people, and he was the abnormal kind. There was no other person like him on Earth, so they couldn't be blamed. After he finished speaking, the boss of the wedding planner company was speechless. The boss of the wedding planner company had some prestige and was quite knowledgeable. If he met other people, he could still maintain his authoritative status. After all, this was the custom of marriage in this world. However, Rinpoche had great power. Even though he was sitting there and speaking calmly, he was imposing and couldn't be refused. With 3 fierce-looking walls standing behind him, the boss opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. Let's do it this way. You can think of other ways. In any case, don't do anything new and follow the procedures that I approve of. Rinpoche threw the paper back on the coffee table and heaved a sigh of relief. This way, there shouldn't be any problems. All that was left was to get a few relatives of the bride. Chapter 847. Sun Qingwen played with a glass teapot and clicked his tongue in wonder. He didn't expect such a beautiful thing to come from this barbaric and backward country. This group of people from a Yun nation had stayed in Lan City for more than half a month. They were most interested in the mirrors, glassware, and spices sold by the imperial family. Although they were expensive, they weren't considered expensive. If the same things appeared in the Yun nation, the price would probably be higher. The only thing that made everyone unhappy was that there were 2 kinds of items, and the aboriginals were only selling them for 1/10 of the price. Even if it was 10 times the price, he still felt that it was cheap. This showed how profitable these items were. These days, there were people who wanted to find 2 aboriginals to buy on their behalf, but unfortunately, they didn't succeed. Those barbarians actually didn't want to earn money. It was really hateful. Young Master Jiang Biebu, requests an audience. A report came from outside. Sun Qingwen revealed a happy expression. Let him in quickly. Hurried footsteps were heard, and soon, a young master of about the same age and dressed in a brocade robe was brought in. Yongjiang City and Hu City weren't far from each other, so they knew each other. These days, their relationship was very good. The young master laughed when he saw Sun Qingwen. "Brother Sun, you really can sit still. If I don't go out for 2 days, I will definitely suffocate to death." Sun Qingwen smiled. "Brother Jiang has a lively nature, which makes me very envious." Then his tone changed. "This Lan City is called a capital city, but in fact, it is inferior to a small city in the Yun nation. There's almost no entertainment in the city, and it is very desolate. Moreover, the descendants of the barbarian officials can be seen everywhere. They are rather barbaric and fight all day long. A few days ago, a few people from the Qian family and the AI family's AI Wenfu were injured by a woman. It is said that she is the granddaughter of Hong Wu. On that day, AI Wenfu and the Qian brothers even went to the Hong residence to give gifts. Thinking about it, it is quite ridiculous. If we didn't need those barbarians." Jiang Biebu snorted with contempt and a trace of anger in his voice. In any case, the Qian brothers and AI Wenfu had the same status as him. When they were injured, he also felt the same way. When they were in the Yun nation, When did they suffer this kind of humiliation? We are under the eaves. Now that the Yun nation is dead, Great Xia can't even take care of itself and can only take shelter under these barbarians. Sun Qingwen sighed slightly. Then, he raised his head and smiled. Let's not talk about these annoying things. We will return in 2 days. When we return to the Yun nation, we must have a good drink. There's a little Yang Chun in my city's red-leaning brothel. Her features are quite similar to that one, and she's extremely seductive. She was originally my bud, and I've been sick of her for a long time. However, when I saw that one, my heart was greatly moved. When I go back, I must properly torment her. As he spoke, he pointed in the direction of the imperial city. Jiang Biebu revealed an extremely interested expression when he heard this. There's such a thing? How much imagination? Sun Qingwen thought for a moment and extended 4 fingers. 4. It's a little low. Jiang Biebu looked disappointed. 40% resemblance? They didn't look alike at all. Sun Qingwen shook his head and lowered his voice. Who is that person? A famous expert in the world, and an emperor at that. How could an ordinary woman cultivate such beauty and temperament? 40% resemblance is already not low. The most important thing is that this person can be casually played with. As long as you imagine it in your mind, that feeling, heh. Jiang Biebu thought about it and revealed a fascinated expression. Then he laughed softly and said, Zhao Prince Consort really got lucky. The two of them laughed and chatted in low voices for a while. Brothels and romantic affairs were common in the Yun nation, and they were already used to it when the news got out. After a while, Jiang Biebu said mysteriously, I came to look for Brother Sun today because I found a good place to go. Oh, tell me about it. Sun Qingwen asked. There's an alley with 4 courtyards in Lan City, and there's a golden jade pavilion. So it's there. I found out about it on the first day. Sun Qingwen said indifferently. If it's just a brothel, there's naturally nothing to say. However, there's an earthwheel expert as a prostitute. After Jiang Biebu finished speaking, he waited to see the other party's reaction. As expected, he was shocked. Earthwheel expert? Isn't that so? It's said that they're the elders of a few sects in the Yun nation. They're young, but they're all geniuses of the generation. In the past, even though our backgrounds weren't low, it was impossible for us to get involved. However, since they've fallen to such a state, they might even be happy to see us. Jiang Biebu smiled. Earthwheel experts could be worshipped even in the warlords' residences, and they had to spend a lot of money to support them every year. Furthermore, these were ordinary Earthwheel experts. One had to know that Earthwheel experts were also divided into different grades. It was said that the girls in the brothel were all good-looking and young. If they were placed in the various sects, they would be considered geniuses. It was not easy for them to even meet them. Now that they had landed in a brothel in Lan City, this made him think about it. He was willing to lose 3 years of his life just by sleeping with them once. We're going back the day after tomorrow. Before we leave, we have to test out the martial arts of those geniuses and fight them for 300 rounds. We can brag about it when we go back. After Jiang Biebu finished speaking, Sun Qingwen was also tempted. He laughed and said, I can't be left behind for this kind of thing. Just as the two of them were thinking about going to Jinyu Building to pick a few geniuses that were usually out of reach, more than 10 aboriginal men came to the courtyard. One of them was more than 2 meters tall. He stood there like a small giant and carried 2 big axes on his back. For others, the axes were 2-handed, but for him, they were 1-handed axes. The burly man stood at the door, grinned, and his eyes were filled with ferocity. He kicked the door open and said, I'm Hong Bao from the Department of Inspection, and I'm here on Her Majesty's orders to take your heads. Immediately, someone poked his waist and said, Sir, that's the wrong word. What? Hong Bao turned his head and glared at him. Sir, we're here to capture people, not exterminate their entire families. That person laughed. Hong Bao scratched his bald head and said, Damn, we used to kill people directly and forgot about this. Then, he shouted like a thunderclap, capture them all. If they dare to resist, kill them all. Kill them all. Kill them all. The rest of the people followed his voice and rushed out. However, there was still someone standing behind him who reminded him, "Sir, kill anyone who resists." That sounds more imposing. Hong Bao was rather pleased with himself. What did Zhao Prince Consort say? Imposing is the most important thing in this world. While he was speaking, the expressions of everyone in the courtyard changed, and they were so scared that their legs turned to jelly. "Sir, we are envoys from whose city and are here to celebrate Her Majesty's wedding. What have we done wrong?" The Earthwheel expert who was leading the team shouted with a pale face. Chapter 848. Sun Qingwen and Jiang Biebu were carried out of the house like chickens and thrown to the ground. Both of them were shivering. Jiang Biebu shouted, "Sir, you've misunderstood. I'm Jiang Biebu, the son of the warlord of Yongjiang City. I'm here to visit, not to live here." Jiang Biebu, let me think. "Yes, you are one." Hong Bao laughed heartily. "This will save me some trouble." He then took out a piece of paper and looked at it. He couldn't understand a single word. He threw it to the person behind him and said, "You read it." The person behind him didn't even look at it and threw it to another person. "You read it. Don't you know that I can't read?" The other person scolded fiercely. "Where's little 15? Little 15's wife gave birth today, right? Sir gave him half a month's leave." Someone answered, "Read it yourselves." Another person threw the paper in front of Jiang Biebu and Sun Qingwen. They glanced at the words on the paper and immediately turned pale. Their clothes were drenched in sweat. "Read it." The burly man at the side kicked one of them impatiently. Sun Qingwen and Jiang Biebu, "Louder. Do you hear me?" As envoys of Hu and Yongjiang City, they privately mocked Her Majesty and the court officials during the banquet. Their words were disrespectful. Damn it, how dare they criticize Her Majesty? Hong Bao's eyes widened when he heard that. He kicked Jiang Biebu's chest, causing him to spit out blood in midair, and his chest caved in. "How dare you? See if he's dead. If he's dead, say that he dared to resist. If he's not dead, help him and let him die quickly." Hong Bao scolded, "Sir, I'm afraid you'll be punished for this." "What's there to be afraid of? How dare he criticize Her Majesty in private? Tomorrow, I'll bring some people to wash him in blood in whatever city." Hong Bao scolded with his eyes wide open. Sun Qingwen immediately went limp, and a puddle of yellow liquid flowed down. Initially, he still had some hope. At that time, it was mainly Jiang Biebu who said it. At most, he would receive some punishment and think of a way to remedy it. He didn't expect the other party to kill him directly. Now, his intestines were green with regret. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have been so talkative. But at that time, the two of them had lowered their voices so low that it was impossible for others to hear them. How to get out? Not only was his intestines turning green with regret, even some of the young masters who were eavesdropping outside the wall, who had been cautious with their words and actions, were still fine. Some of them who had spoken disrespectfully these days were so scared that their faces turned green. At this moment, a person separated the crowd and strode into the courtyard. "Sir, this is inappropriate." The people outside the courtyard were still wondering who was so daring. When they saw the figure, they were all shocked. Lin Mengsheng. Why is he getting involved in this mess? Let's take a look. Hong Bao was furious when he heard Lin Mengsheng's words. When he turned his head and saw that it was someone from the Yun Nation, a sinister smile appeared on his face, and a murderous aura emanated from his body. "Sir, I'm Lin Mengsheng. I'm currently working in the Black Bamboo Academy, and I'm your courtier." Lin Mengsheng wasn't afraid at all in the face of Hong Bao's murderous aura. "Kid, what did you say?" Hong Bao wanted to kill Lin Mengsheng at first, but after hearing that Lin Mengsheng was working in the Black Bamboo Academy, he recalled that he had heard of such a matter. However, he didn't restrain his murderous aura and continued to emit a threatening aura. "Sir, did Her Majesty order you to arrest or kill people?" No matter what these two people said or did, even if they were convicted, Her Majesty will be the one to decide. A country has its laws, and a family has its rules. This is the case for both the Yun Nation and Dayo. It's inappropriate for Sir to make decisions based on your personal preferences. Then he softened his voice and said, Sir, the Yun nation has just surrendered, and the people are in a state of panic. These two people have special identities. They are envoys from the warlords. Although their statuses aren't high, their significance is different. Sir represents the imperial court and Her Majesty. If you kill people at will, it will inevitably cause the people of the Yun nation to feel insecure, and there will be chaos in the end. The statuses of these two people aren't much, but if you kill them at will, the impact will be huge. I'm afraid that neither Her Majesty nor Zhao Prince Consort will be willing to see this happen. Judging from Zhao Prince Consort's previous actions, he has always used coercion and gentleness against Tianjing Basin and the Yun nation, incorporating Tianjing Basin and the Yun nation into Dayo's territory. Although Sir is happy by doing this, it will do more harm than good to the overall situation. I wonder if Sir thinks that your personal preferences or Zhao Prince Consort plans are more important. Hong Bao widened his eyes and stared at Lin Mengsheng as if he was looking at something strange. After a while, he said, Damn it, what are you talking about? Sir, you look straightforward, but you understand. Lin Mengsheng said faintly. Hong Bao suddenly burst into laughter and said, Although I don't really understand, it sounds very impressive. As he laughed, he patted Lin Mengsheng's shoulder a few times with his palm leaf-sized palm. Lin Mengsheng's face twitched slightly. If he didn't use medicine, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to lift his arm for 8 to 10 days. After Hong Bao finished laughing, he turned his head and asked, Is he dead? He's still breathing. Carry him to the doctor's office and keep him alive before sending him to prison. Take the rest of them away. After laughing, he looked down at Lin Mengsheng with a sinister smile and said, Kid, what you said makes a little bit of sense. However, I suddenly don't like the look of you and want to beat you to death. He then laughed heartily and led everyone away. After Hong Bao and the people from the Department of Inspection left, the people outside rushed into the courtyard and surrounded Lin Mengsheng. No one had expected that Lin Mengsheng would actually stand up for those two people and even persuade this barbarian official. In particular, he didn't back down when facing that fierce person just now, which was even more admirable. Many people realized that Lin Mengsheng had a position in Lan City, was also from the Yun nation, and was willing to stand up for them. Compared to the others, he was more valuable to befriend. Even if he couldn't climb to a high position, befriending him would still be beneficial without any harm. Ren Baqian and the Empress sat opposite each other with a chessboard in front of them. He held the chess piece and racked his brains for a long time before placing a white piece. The contented Empress, who was sitting opposite him, ate a fruit and quickly placed a red piece. Don't ask why there were red pieces. The Empress liked the color red. 5, you win. Ren Baqian looked at the 5 connected red pieces on the chessboard, threw the white piece aside, and said, I'm not playing anymore. The Empress wrinkled her nose, was in a good mood, and had a smile on her face. Ren Baqian's flustered and exasperated look made her happier than admitting defeat. Before long, Exanja came over and reported, Your Majesty, those people have been arrested. At the same time, she handed over a piece of paper and said, This is from the rear guard commandery. The Empress took a look and threw it to Ren Baqian. Ren Baqian took it, looked at it carefully, dusted it, and said, This Lin Mengsheng is quite interesting. Hong Bao is too daring. I ordered him to arrest them, but he actually dared to kill them. The Empress was concerned about another matter. Ren Baqian laughed and said, It's also because your Majesty holds a high position in his heart and can't stand others speaking ill of you. Even so, he can't be punished. The Empress said. Ren Baqian was slightly curious and asked, What is your Majesty going to do? The Empress thought for a while and said, He will be fined half a year's salary. Ren Baqian nodded. This was a punishment that wasn't too light nor too heavy. Reward him with another 1,000 taels of silver. At least I like his way of thinking. The Empress said again. Hong Bao's annual salary is only 800 taels of silver, but he still earned it. Your Majesty, are you going to punish him or reward him? Ren Baqian laughed. The Empress blinked and asked, Don't you always tell me to be fair in rewards and punishments? Rinpoche was stunned and didn't pay attention to what the Empress said. Instead, he was attracted by her playful look when she blinked. He leaned over and gently kissed her eyelids. Qing Yuan and Hong Wuan were used to this and didn't mind. Both of them had seen even more shameless things. On the contrary, Xian's eyes lit up behind her glasses. Your Majesty, the original location of the palace has been cleared and the cause of the collapse has been found. Oh, let's go take a look. When Rinpoche and the Empress arrived, they saw that the original location of the palace had been cleared for 7 meters. There were holes that were 0.5 meter in diameter on the earthen wall at the edge of the palace. There seemed to be at least a dozen of them around the palace. The two of them were surprised at first, and then their faces lit up. There is only one thing in the palace that liked to dig holes like this: the Roaring Emperor. No one knew when that fellow had dug so many holes under the bedchamber that it looked like a sieve. Of course, these holes were 5 meters below the surface, which meant that they were dug under the foundation. If there were no accidents, it probably wouldn't collapse for decades. It was somewhat far-fetched to say that these holes were the cause of the palace's collapse. However, the Empress didn't care whether it was far-fetched or not. If it was said that it was done, then it was done. Your Majesty, the palace collapsed because of these holes. However, I discovered something just now. There's a layer of stone below with traces of artificial carvings. It is very likely that there is a secret chamber below. Dig it, the Empress immediately ordered. There was actually a secret chamber under the palace, which made Rinpoche and the Empress curious as to what was down there. Rinpoche casually ordered, "Capture the Roaring Emperor." Chapter 849. Speaking of which, the Roaring Emperor wasn't weak. Although it was only at the manual level and relied entirely on its roar, an Earthwheel expert would faint for a long time with its roar. Ordinary people would be roared to death. However, it was like a domesticated dog that naturally liked to please people. "Tie it up. Just tie it up here." Rinpoche instructed the guards to tie the Roaring Emperor to a rockery that was as tall as a human. It stared at the two guards and allowed them to tie it to the rock. Although it struggled a little, its strength was no different from that of a baby in front of the guards. It simply showed an extremely flattering expression and almost stuck out its tongue. "Gag its mouth," Rinpoche said again. After the guards gagged its mouth, he squatted in front of it with a kind smile and asked, "Do you know what you have done wrong?" The Roaring Emperor was at a loss. "Were you the one who dug the tunnels under the palace?" Rinpoche continued to smile kindly. It would be fine if the tunnels were under the palace, but the problem was that the Roaring Emperor and the Crow General were more than 500 meters away from the palace in a straight line. It was unknown how many palace halls there were in between. Furthermore, there were dozens of holes in the walls around the palace. It was estimated that the entire palace was like a sieve. If this was done by a human, even 9 generations of the culprit wouldn't be enough to punish them. The Roaring Emperor continued to be at a loss. "If you don't shake your head, it means that you agree. Bring me the scissors." Rinpoche took the scissors and gestured at the Roaring Emperor's little D*CK. "Do you know what will happen if you cut this off?" The Roaring Emperor's flattering expression suddenly froze, and its eyes widened as if it had seen something extremely terrifying. "You will no longer be troubled by your estrus period. Happy?" The Roaring Emperor struggled frantically with fear in its eyes. Rinpoche slapped the scissors on the Roaring Emperor's penis again and again. He slapped it a dozen times in a row, pointed at the hole in the wall, and asked, "Are you still going to dig a hole under the palace?" The Roaring Emperor nodded frantically. "Oh, your D*CK is valuable, but digging holes is even more valuable, right?" Rinpoche smiled brightly and placed the blade of the scissors on the Roaring Emperor's D*CK. The Roaring Emperor's movements froze for a moment. Then he shook his head frantically. Rinpoche didn't want to do anything to the Roaring Emperor. He flicked its little D*CK a few times and scared it before letting it go. As soon as the Roaring Emperor landed on the ground, it instinctively wanted to dig a hole to escape. However, its tail was stepped on. She turned around and saw Run Bachien looking at her with a kind face. A fawning smile subconsciously appeared on his face. After being flicked dozens of times more, the Roaring Emperor looked at its own D*CK, wanting to cry but having no tears. After confirming that it was only a little swollen, it did not make another hole this time. Instead, it ran away like a wisp of smoke. Rinpochian shook his head slightly. This guy was too fast at digging. The moment he landed, he had already dug a hole that was 1/2 meter in diameter and 1/2 meter in depth. The Empress was still staring at the excavation site. At this moment, a corner of the excavation site had already been cleared. 9 meters below the original bedroom, there was a piece of grayish-white rock. The surface of the rock was flat, and it could be confirmed that it was created by humans. He reckoned that there might be some sort of secret room under the rock. At this time, they were expanding the excavation area to search for an entrance. He walked to the Empress's side and said, "Your Majesty, we can start preparing the new palace." The Empress tilted her head and looked at him. "Your Majesty, you don't want the palace to collapse one day, right?" Rinpochian smiled bitterly. Currently, the bottom of the palace was like a sieve. It might collapse one day if there was a heavy rain. If a large area of the palace collapsed one day, one could imagine how great the impact would be. At that time, rumors would spread everywhere, and there would definitely be a big mess. As for plugging the holes under the palace, Rinpochian did not even think about it. They would have to dig up the entire palace, which wasn't much easier than rebuilding a palace. Furthermore, they already had plans to rebuild the capital and build a modern capital. They originally planned to build it after the roads were repaired, but now they could prepare ahead of time. When the Empress heard what Rinpochian said, she immediately recalled the incident where the two of them fooled around until the bedroom collapsed. Her face looked as if it was dripping blood. Her small fist hammered Rinpochian's chest. In response, Rinpochian was sent flying. He directly crashed into a tree that was as thick as the mouth of a bowl, causing a rain of petals to fill the sky. The cleanup work continued for another day. After clearing one round along the earthen wall, they realized that the area of the rock underneath was actually larger than the bedroom. In the end, the Empress simply resorted to violent means. She directly punched down and directly opened a skylight. With one punch, the Empress smashed a huge rock with a radius of 2 meters, revealing a passage that was 4 to 5 meters tall. The passage was actually paved with white jade, and at the same time, a dusty smell assailed their nostrils. "Your Majesty, this place has been sealed for an unknown period of time. The air is so turbid that people can't go down. We have to leave it here for at least a few hours." Rinpochian stopped the Empress, who immediately wanted to go down and take a look. Although they could also put candles down to see how the oxygen was, Rinpochian felt that the smell would definitely be bad after being sealed for an unknown period of time. In any case, it was just here and wouldn't run away. "That's settled then," the Empress immediately said. After another day, there were more than 20 people standing in the courtyard of the former sleeping quarters. Not only were the Empress, Rinpochian, and Xian Jahir, but even Tong Jinya was here. There were also a few officials from the Ministry of Works, and the rest were palace guards. "Take a torch and go down. If it's extinguished, come back immediately," Rinpochian instructed a few guards. "I didn't expect Zhao, Prince Consort, to know about this." Tong Jinya was slightly surprised. "If it weren't for the people in the Ministry of Works who specialize in this matter, I wouldn't even know about this." "How did Zhao Prince Consort know about it?" Rinpochian rolled his eyes. "This was common knowledge, all right? Even a 3-year-old knew." "Your Majesty, Zhao Prince Consort." "Minister, sir, we will go down first." 2 officials from the Ministry of Works cupped their hands and jumped down. The jump to the bottom was about 6 to 7 meters high, but it wasn't a problem for them. They first moved the gravel to one side, lit up the torches, and then began to advance toward the north and south ends. Soon after, the Empress, Rinpochian, and the others jumped into the passage one after another and looked around. The passage was about 4 meters high. The walls on both sides were made of the same material as the huge rocks above, but they were polished and smoother. Rinpoche bent over and touched the ground. It was warm and delicate, and he could see the texture in the light. He immediately exclaimed, "It's indeed white jade. How extravagant! Was this built by the How Nation?" This passage was about 3 meters wide. Both ends were covered by darkness, and it was impossible to see how far it went. Just the value of this white jade alone was very high. This was real jade, not marble like white marble. Even if it was of inferior quality, such a large piece of jade was still very valuable. Furthermore, even though Rinpoche didn't know much about jade, the jade road under his feet was white and flawless. It was glossy, soft, and exquisite to the touch. It definitely wasn't inferior jade. Rinpoche didn't know how they found so much white jade. "I didn't find any records of this." Tong Jingye shook his head. After finding out about the situation here last night, he sent people to Qingshin Palace Hall to search for the books left behind by the How Nation, but to no avail. Before the establishment of the How Nation, there was a Jiang Nation here. Perhaps it was established by the Jiang Nation, an official from the Ministry of Works guessed. Rinpoche looked at the Empress's thoughtful expression and immediately asked, "Your Majesty, what do you know?" "Didn't you say yesterday that you wanted to rebuild the palace? I want to use this white jade to build a palace." "Rebuild the palace?" Tong Jingye was shocked. Rebuilding such a palace required a lot of manpower and material resources, and the entire national treasury of Dayo might not even be enough for it in a year. Now that the Yun Nation had just been conquered, more than half of the aboriginals were still poor, and they actually wanted to rebuild the palace? Let's talk about this later. Rinpoche knew what Tong Jingye was thinking by looking at his expression and gave him a look. Seeing Rinpoche's look, Tong Jingye knew that there must be something going on. Furthermore, the Empress wasn't an extravagant person, and this wasn't the right time to ask questions. Chapter 850. 2 guards and an official from the Ministry of Works were holding torches and looking at the drawings on the wall. When Rinpoche and the Empress came over, the 3 of them gave way and said, "Your Majesty, it's here." Then they waved the torch forward and said, "It's all the way to the front." Rinpoche, the Empress, and the rest stopped and looked up. They saw that the drawings on the wall were about half an inch deep and had smooth edges. Tong Jingye traced the markings with his finger and said, "It was carved by a finger. The finger is about 30% narrower than mine, and it was drawn by someone other than the Aboriginals." This wasn't surprising. After all, the Aboriginals had only left the 100,000 mountains 70 years ago. The construction of this place was at least in the early and middle period of the How Nation, perhaps even longer than that. However, there was nothing to prove the time. This place had been covered in dust for too long, and it was hard to tell whether it had been 300, 500, or even 1,000 years. Continue to look ahead. After instructing the official from the Ministry of Works and the 2 guards, he looked up at the mural. At first glance, it looked like a child's graffiti. There were small holes, arcs, and irregular patterns all over the wall. A thin line meandered from the beginning all the way to a place that couldn't be seen. Everything on the wall was messy and irregular. Rather than calling it a mural, it would be better to say that it was scratched by a crazy person. However, upon closer inspection, it seemed a little different. The Empress frowned for a long time before suddenly relaxing and asking softly, "What does this look like?" "Nizi." 2 voices sounded at the same time. Thump! The Empress appeared beside Tong Jingye in an instant and pressed his bald head to the ground. His entire head was pressed into the ground, and the ground was filled with cracks. "Your Majesty, this white jade is to be used to build a palace." Rinpoche was a little distressed, mainly because he had spoken the truth just now. The Empress still hadn't vented her anger, so she stepped on Tong Jingye's head again and said coldly, "If you continue to speak without thinking, I will hang you on the top of the city wall so that the commoners can pay their respects to the Minister of Works." She then turned to look at Rinpoche and realized that his gaze was constantly moving up and down her chest. Her pretty face quickly flushed, but her eyes were flickering with a dangerous glint. Rinpoche was already considering taking the initiative to press his head to the ground so that it wouldn't hurt too much. "There's a door here." The voice came just in time. He felt that they should be given a Dayo Peace Prize. The Empress gave Rinpoche a look that said, "Just you wait. I'll teach you a lesson later." Then she walked forward. A crashing sound came from behind. Tong Jingye pulled his head out and patted the dust off it. He then looked at Rinpoche with hidden bitterness. Rinpoche responded with a smile that said, "We are different." After walking along the passageway for more than 40 meters, everyone finally saw the so-called door. Its entire body was black, and it was made of some unknown metal. Under the light of the torch, it reflected a cold luster. On the iron gate was a winged snake with its tail hanging down to the ground. Its head was near the top of the iron gate, and a pair of wings were folded behind its back. Different from the color of the iron door, it appeared to be gray in color. Rinpoche subconsciously felt that it looked familiar and immediately asked, "What kind of beast is this?" Tong Jingye shook his head to indicate that he did not know. The Empress had no reaction at all. It seemed that both of them didn't know, but when Rinpoche saw this picture, he thought of the Chinese legend of the flying serpent. Rinpoche always felt that this world was somewhat related to Earth. Although the language was different, Chinese was also spoken in this world. Furthermore, there were dragons, phoenixes, kirins, and even a kirin in the palace. However, Qi Shui wasn't as powerful as the mythical beast in the legends. It couldn't fly or burrow into the ground. At most, it was at the cardinal heaven level, which was a far cry from the legends. However, there was no doubt that Qi Shui was similar to the kirin in the legends on Earth. They even had the same name. With these similarities, the appearance of another soaring serpent from Huaxia mythology in this world was not too surprising. However, Rinpoche didn't voice out his conjecture. The Empress stretched out her palm to push open the iron gate, but her face changed the moment she touched the flying serpent. She retreated a few meters and stood right in front of Rinpoche. It's true, the Empress's words shocked everyone. Everyone thought that the beast on the gate was a carving and didn't expect it to be a real beast. However, when the Empress touched the beast on the gate, cracks began to appear on its surface, following which pieces of the beast fell to the ground. Only then did everyone realize that the beast had already become an empty shell. In the blink of an eye, the beast turned into pieces on the ground. However, the Empress's eyes flashed. She went forward and picked up a gray bead that was about the size of a pigeon egg. She casually rubbed it, and the bead began to emit a green luster, but it was very dim. "What is this?" Everyone was puzzled. Whether it was this beast or this bead, they had never seen anything like it before. Rinpoche reached out and rubbed the bead on the Empress's palm. The surface of the bead was still a little elastic. Rinpoche immediately imagined that this beast had condensed all of its strength into a bead before its death for its descendants. This was a common plot in wuxia novels. However, he still had to study this bead carefully to know what it was. The Empress fiddled with it and couldn't figure out what it was used for. She then threw it to Rinpoche, who quickly caught it and put it away. Everyone else thought that this was a beast that they had never seen before, but Rinpoche treated it as a mythical beast from the legends. Whatever it left behind would definitely not be ordinary. Is this beast the guard of this gate? Rinpoche guessed. It's possible. The female Empress nodded her head. This passageway was not damaged at all before they came in. This beast was either hung on the metal door or it had been here all along and died later on. Everyone was more inclined to the latter possibility. This beast didn't leave this place until it died. "I wonder who the owner of this place is," the Empress said softly. She stepped forward and was about to push the gate open. If everyone guessed correctly, the guard here was that weathered beast, so there shouldn't be any mechanisms on the gate. However, just in case, Tong Jingye stepped forward to stop the Empress. "Your Majesty, let me do it." Tong Jingye placed his hand on the gate and increased his strength bit by bit. When he used 80% of his strength, his face began to turn red, and a dull, creaking sound came from the gate. "Open!" Tong Jingye shouted. He used all his strength and began to push the gate open bit by bit. Everyone was on guard until Tong Jingye pushed the main gate open, but there were no mechanisms or anything like that. However, there was a gust of wind, and the torch in the guard's hand flickered before suddenly extinguishing. Everyone felt a little stuffy in their chests. Chapter 851. Who lights the candle and blows out the lamp? It sounds pretty powerful. The Empress was still a little confused after being pulled outside. It's just a legend. In fact, there's a lack of oxygen inside. Ren Baqian sat cross-legged on the ground and laughed. Oxygen? I think I've heard of it before. The Empress pondered and waved her hand. Qing Yuan and Hong Wan carried 2 chairs over. There are actually different components in the air, such as nitrogen, hydrogen, ozone, oxygen, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide. There are also various inert gases. Among them, oxygen is what living things need to survive. Without oxygen, they will suffocate to death. Ren Baqian rested his elbows on the chair and was too lazy to get up. In fact, it was cooler under the shade of the trees. In addition, some of the gases in this world were different from those on Earth. This was a conclusion that the Research Institute had obtained from some microorganisms. However, Rinpoche didn't bring back a bottle of air, so he naturally didn't verify it. The Empress sat on a chair and waved her hand while listening to Rinpoche's explanation. "Bring me some wine. It's unknown how long it's been sealed down there. Some invisible microorganisms will consume oxygen, and after a long time, there will be a lack of oxygen. If an ordinary person goes in, they will die in a few minutes. There may also be some other gases sealed inside, which are harmful and not beneficial. Therefore, ventilation is needed before going in," Rinpoche explained to the Empress. Tong Jinye and the officials from the Ministry of Works found it interesting and couldn't help but ask, why did the torch go out? They knew about this phenomenon but didn't know why. It's because of oxygen. Not only do living things need oxygen, but flames also need oxygen. If there's a lack of oxygen, the flame will go out. Rinpoche's explanation made them even more interested. This so-called oxygen can really play a lot of roles. Under normal circumstances, it will take at least half a day for ventilation to go in, one of the officials from the Ministry of Work said. It's easy to speed it up. Find someone in the passage and strike at the door with all their might to drive the airflow and accelerate the air exchange. This will shorten the time. Exinja, the Empress called out softly. I'll arrange it, Your Majesty. Exinja had never been slow to respond to official matters and immediately understood. Soon, the sound of an empty palm striking the air could be heard from the pit. It sounded like a huge object was being waved, but it was somewhat different. This was much more useful than using a fan. Sir Tong, what era do you think this is from? Rinpoche asked. Tong Jinye shook his head. I don't know much about this. Rinpoche had a vague idea that this passage was probably left behind when the human race was chased out of this place, or perhaps not long after that. The soaring serpent. Even if it couldn't compare to a qilin or a dragon, it wasn't too far off. That was the most likely time to appear. If that was the case, someone definitely wanted to leave something here. In that case, Rinpoche had some guesses about the things on the wall. Your Majesty, what do you think that portrait is about? Rinpoche placed his palm on the Empress's knee. She casually placed a fruit in his hand. Their movements were as smooth as flowing water, and there wasn't the slightest bit of hesitation in their hands. This made Tong Jinye's eyebrows twitch. He inexplicably thought of that woman from back then. Do you have an idea? The Empress asked casually. Does Your Majesty have a guess as well? Rinpoche finished the fruit in a few bites. I think it might be a road map, Rinpoche said bluntly. This is the map of the 60,000 mountains. The first place we saw when we went down was the forest pillar screen. When we got close to the door, we would be in the depths of the 60,000 mountains, the Empress said. Your Majesty can actually recognize the other party's drawing skills. Rinpoche was very impressed. Being able to recognize a map of this level was already a kind of ability. However, The Empress's words confirmed his thoughts. How can it be a road map of the 60,000 mountains here? Tang Xinye was slightly stunned. Had you forgotten what I said? It's just a guess, and we can only know the specifics by observing it. The Empress said to Hong Wan, "Go to Qingxin Palace Hall. There's a map of the vicinity of the forest pillar screen left behind by the Han Nation there. Go and get it." She then snorted and said, "This map was drawn when the Han Nation attacked the mountain stronghold." After Hong Wan left, Tang Xinye's face was gloomy. He recalled the things that His Majesty had said. The human race had been driven here from a distant place, and there were less than 100,000 of them. A portion of them were left behind to defend the 60,000 mountains, while the rest came to the plains to establish a nation. There were many other races in the 60,000 mountains. On the other side of the 60,000 mountains, there were the so-called tens of thousands of races. When the Empress first said this, everyone in the imperial court was shocked. However, this matter was too unimaginable, and there was no other news, so everyone gradually put this matter to the back of their minds. The passage below wasn't simple. Just the white jade floor alone wasn't something that ordinary people could achieve. If the roadmap of the 60,000 mountains was really left on the wall, combined with what the Empress had said, it was very likely that it was left behind from that period. When a map was brought over, Ren Baqin glanced at it. It was much more presentable than the things on the wall below. At least he could tell that it was a map. After looking at it for a long time, Ren Baqin couldn't figure anything out and could only give up. After another hour, everyone felt that it was about time and went down to the passage again. They weren't in a hurry to go inside, but stopped at the beginning of the mural on the wall. After comparing it with the map, it was very easy to see the problem. This is the forest pillar screen. It's about the same position as on the map. That's right, it's indeed there. Ren Baqin pointed to the holes on the wall. Each hole was a mountain peak. This is Mount Yufan, this is the Black Ridge, and this is Mount Pingyang. Tang Xinye compared them one by one. Your Majesty, this is the end of the map. The map only shows the range of the forest pillar screen for half a month, Tang Xinye said as he gestured. However, on the wall, it was less than 1 meter. The mural on the wall was more than 40 meters long. If this was true, it would take at least 2 years to complete the route drawn on the wall. This is Qiulong Cliff. They passed through here in the past. The Empress calculated as she walked and then pointed to one of the points. There was a strange symbol in that position. After hearing what the Empress said and looking at the symbol carefully, one could barely guess that it was a symbol of a dragon's head. The drawing of this symbol was too demonic. Ren Baqin believed that it was a pile of feces with 2 wooden sticks stuck in it. It would take at least 1.5 months to travel from his city through the forest pillar screen to Qiulong Cliff, and that was with the speed of a mount. On the wall, there was only a distance of 1.5 meters. Looking at the wall behind them that was dozens of meters long, everyone took a deep breath. Now everyone finally had a little idea of how big the 60,000 mountains was. According to the length of the map, it would take at least 2 years to get out of here. There was a zigzagging line on the wall from the beginning to the end, which was the route that those people had taken. Chapter 852. The sound of footsteps resounded in the passage, and no one paid attention to the route map on the wall. Everyone was looking forward to finding out what was in that secret chamber. When they first discovered that there was a building under the palace, they thought that it was a hidden treasure of the Han Nation. However, the evidence at this moment indicated that this passage and the secret chamber should have been left behind by the humans after they evacuated here a long time ago. Compared to the things left behind from this period, wealth was nothing. Even if the aboriginals were poor, even if Dayo had no money, even if they had a lot. Anyway, even if they had no money, they could still rob others. In any case, the Empress's 3 views had never been correct. To her, and even the imperial court, robbing other nations was as right as eating and drinking. The guard held a torch and entered the secret chamber first. The light from the torch immediately illuminated the secret chamber. However, the secret chamber was unexpectedly large, and the light from the torch couldn't illuminate the entire place. After passing through the door of the secret chamber, The space expanded to the sides. The entire secret chamber was 20 meters wide, and the floor was completely paved with white jade. After walking a few meters forward, a white jade bridge appeared in front of them. On both sides of the bridge was a pool that was full of yellow-brown liquid that emitted a gloomy aura. Everyone stopped in their tracks. In a trance, they seemed to see a world that they had never seen before. Countless humans in armor and weapons were fighting a bloody battle with all kinds of foreign races. Some had human heads and beast bodies. Some had beast heads and human bodies. Some were expressionless herdsmen, and there were jade-wasted slaves that filled the sky. There were also people from the 8-armed race that had 4 or even 6 arms. There were also people from races that were 4 to 5 meters tall that were like giants. There were even countless fellows that couldn't be distinguished between foreign races and beasts. All the races were killing each other in this area. However, apart from the humans, all the other races were enemies. Streaks of sword light flashed, and heads flew into the air. The barehanded warriors tore their opponents into 2 halves. Groups of humans were bleeding in this kind of killing, and their faces were filled with indignation and unwillingness as they fell to the ground with a thud. Shouts, killing cries, the sound of blood splattering, the sound of corpses falling to the ground, the sound of weapons colliding, and even the sound of something breaking through the air rushed into everyone's ears at almost the same time. This kind of tragic scene made everyone tremble all over. It was as if there was a ball of fire pressing on their chests, making them want to scream out loud. A figure rose from the ground, and a red sun leaped out from behind him, stopping about 3 feet above the man's head. Although they were too far away to see clearly, the pressure emanating from that figure caused everyone to involuntarily take a few steps back. Looks of fear appeared on the faces of countless outsiders. Then, the man swung his arms downwards, and the red sun smashed down. Boom! His eyes seemed to be covered with flames. The guards' bodies swayed as they woke up from the hallucination, their bodies drenched in sweat. Following them were the officials from the Ministry of Works and Rinpoche. The moment he woke up, he realized that he was clenching his fists tightly, and his back was drenched in cold sweat. Everyone looked at each other, and a look of surprise appeared on their faces. What did I just see? Who was that figure? Was that really a human? At that moment, Tong Jinye suddenly shouted angrily. He took a step forward and threw a punch. The wind from his punch whistled, and he didn't hold back at all. It was as if he wanted to smash the enemy in front of him into pieces. However, just as he threw the punch, Tong Jinye suddenly woke up, slightly withdrew his punch, and staggered. Only half of the punch was withdrawn, and the other half was still thrown forward. The air suddenly exploded with a loud sound, and a gale swept in all directions. This retracted punch caused the air to explode. Rinpoche glanced at Tong Jinye. Although this old man was an old hooligan who loved to court death, his strength was really amazing. He might not be weaker than Li Chinchio and Chiwanya. However, when he thought about the scene that he just saw, there were actually many people who weren't weaker than Tong Jinye. As for the figure that smashed down the red sun, it was even more frightening. Even looking at that figure from afar was enough to make people tremble. Tong Jinye stabilized his body after throwing the punch, and his face was full of shock. At this moment, the Empress's head was also drenched in cold sweat. After a few breaths, the Empress's figure suddenly leaped backward and actually landed behind everyone. At this time, the Empress gradually regained consciousness, looked around, and her expression changed again and again. An official from the Ministry of Works couldn't help but ask with a pale face and a fearful voice, what happened at this time? Such a tragic battlefield was really terrifying. What everyone saw, was it something that had happened before? This is the Wan tribe? Tong Jinye asked in a deep voice. Rinpoche opened his mouth and said in a hoarse voice, "This is the Wan tribe. All of you retreat. The minister of the Ministry of Works, stay behind," the Empress said to everyone after regaining her composure. After hearing the order, everyone didn't dare to stay any longer and retreated out of the door. At this time, the Empress said in a deep voice, That was the battlefield that happened before, and it was recorded by someone using some kind of method. It's the water from the earth in spring. Ren Bachien pointed to the yellowish-brown liquid in the pond around the bridge and said, I can smell it with my eyes closed. This is the water from the earth in spring. Tong Jinya and the Empress didn't realize the difference between smelling with their eyes open and closed. The earthine spring does have a hallucinogenic effect. The Empress nodded. It seems that they used some kind of method to record it and then used the hallucinogenic effect of the earthine spring to let us see that scene. It seems that the more powerful one is, the slower they wake up and the more they see. Rinpoche asked a question that he wanted to know the answer to. What happened to that person? Was he the master of this place? He died. The Empress was moved when she recalled the scene she saw. He was surrounded and killed by several experts from the foreign races. This was expected. Less than 100,000 humans were chased here, so it was expected that such experts would die. However, Rinpoche still felt that it was a pity. He also felt that it was scary. How could the foreign races be so powerful on the other side of the mountain? The power of that red sun, just now, was probably comparable to a miniature nuclear warhead. Although he couldn't see the whole picture, Rinpoche felt that the power of that blow was probably comparable to the 2 miniature nuclear warheads that he had used before. How could a human be so powerful? Seeing such a scene as soon as they came and made everyone feel even more anxious. This jade bridge was about 10 meters long. After crossing it, there was a square platform that was also surrounded by the earthine spring. The platform was about 30 to 40 square meters, and a thin figure was sitting on it. They couldn't see his face clearly, but after seeing the illusion just now, Rinpoche and the others couldn't help but feel respect for him. No matter what, this person was a martyr of the human race. Unfortunately, after so many years, this person's corpse was probably like that of the flying serpent. A jade scroll was spread open before the figure that was sitting cross-legged. The figure's withered finger was pointing at the end of the jade scroll. Chapter 853. The moment Rinpoche saw those 2 words, a sense of sorrow pervaded his heart. The skeleton in front of him was covered in gray clothes made of an unknown material. Its hair was messy, and its skin was dry and clung tightly to the bones, barely maintaining a human sitting posture. Although he didn't know its identity, judging from the white jade road and the flying serpent guarding the door, this skeleton probably had a high status. During the War of the 10,000 Races, the human race was defeated, and the remaining 100,000 were driven to the barren land. The owner of this skeleton was one of them. After passing through the 60,000 mountains, he perished here, and the last word he left before he died was "Go home." Rinpoche's mind instantly came up with a plot of more than 3 million words, which was enough to write a long novel. The owner of the skeleton was either a ruler or a reclusive expert who was seriously injured after the war with the 10,000 races. He dragged his broken body and led the human race through the 60,000 mountains. When he finally couldn't hold on any longer, he left behind a tomb and an endless desire to go home. This kind of sad plot might be made into a movie that would be very popular. Rinpoche subconsciously labeled this place as a tomb. With such a building and 2 skeletons left so deep underground, it looked like a tomb no matter how he looked at it. "Senior, sorry to disturb you." Rinpoche cupped his hands toward the skeleton. "If there is a chance, we will definitely return to that land and send you home." Rinpoche's face was full of rare respect. The Empress and Tong Jinya were the same. They cupped their hands in front of them to express their respect. Rinpoche then stepped forward and carefully pulled out the jade scroll from under the skeleton. Although he was careful enough, the finger was still touched and fell off little by little. Just like the flying serpent, it turned into ashes and scattered on the ground. Until now, no one knew how long it had been since the human race had evacuated here. However, Rinpoche felt that he should be able to find out something from this tomb. Rinpoche then picked up the jade booklet, swept away the dust, and continued to look at it. The scroll was written from right to left, but Rinpochian was used to reading from left to right. Therefore, he directly saw the second last sentence. I didn't put away my clothes. I just remembered this change in style was too fast, and Rinpochian suddenly felt like vomiting blood. All the sorrow that was originally in his heart vanished. The last two sentences were linked together. I just remembered that I didn't put away my clothes, so I went home. Rinpochian felt like he had F** at husky. This unknown expert comrade was too down to earth. Also, what time was it? Still thinking about collecting the clothes at home? Rinpochian rubbed his head and read it from beginning to end. I lament that the human race has withered to such an extent, being driven like livestock for tens of thousands of miles, stained with blood and tears. My kin have all been buried somewhere else. Although I don't have long to live, my heart is sad, and I only hope that the future generations can return to their homeland. I sit and think of the past vividly in my mind. Only now do I remember that I haven't packed my clothes and returned home. There weren't many words on the jade slip, only about 300 or so. The general meaning was similar to what Rinpochian had thought. The humans were driven here. This person was seriously injured and didn't have long to live. As such, he left a grave here in hopes that the people who came after him could return to their homeland one day. In the end, he sat here and waited for death. The past was still vivid in his mind, and he suddenly remembered that he hadn't collected any clothes at home. Go home. He guessed that there were a few more words after that. Going home is unattainable. This was the full text. It didn't say much useful. It only mentioned the blood and tears of the human race along the way and didn't mention a single word about the so-called Wan tribe. The 300 words were mostly sentimental words. However, after reading it, the sense of absurdity in Rinpochian's heart disappeared without a trace, and his heart was full of regret. Before this person died, he wasn't thinking about the future of the human race or the righteousness of the race. Instead, he was thinking about the trivial matters at home. On the contrary, Rinpochian felt that this person was living a more realistic life. The three of them were speechless for a long time after reading it. Rinpochian looked around this person and found that there seemed to be something behind him. He went around and found that there were actually a few animal skin booklets and a jade scroll. Your Majesty, there's still things here. Rinpochian picked up the booklets and the jade scroll from the ground. There were a total of 4 animal skin booklets. After so many years, they hadn't turned into ashes. Although they were a little brittle, they could still be saved. The Empress took the jade scroll and opened it. There weren't any records about the Wan tribe or that land that everyone wanted to know. Instead, there were some self-descriptions of this person. This person on the ground was called Tung Jinji, and he was a member of a sect called the Qingyang sect. The jade scroll recorded some of this person's deeds, and it was like a personal biography. From these words, it was possible to get a glimpse of the situation of that era. For example, this person recorded that there were 5 human emperors in the world at the same time. He had seen 3 of them and fought under 2 of them. For example, at that time, the human race occupied 10 territories and he had traveled to 7 territories. For example, this person recorded that there were 3,000 sects at that time. Generally speaking, this jade scroll was a personal biography, and it was the traces that this person had left in this world. Although it wasn't explicitly stated, it could be seen from the words that this person wasn't a nobody. At the end of the jade scroll, it was written, in the past there were 3,000 sects, but today not a single one of them remains. Leaving behind the Qingyang technique, even if I die, the Qingyang of my sect will not disappear. It seemed that the 4 animal skin booklets were the so-called Qingyang technique. The sect that this person belonged to was probably called the Qingyang sect or the Qingyang sect or something like that. After putting away the 2 jade scrolls and the 4 booklets, the 3 of them looked around on the platform and found nothing valuable. The only thing that existed was that skeleton. Perhaps there was something else on his body, but the 3 of them didn't want to destroy it. After being sealed for so long, it was already rare that it hadn't been eroded after opening the door for ventilation. If they were to touch it, they would probably immediately turn into ashes. Just as they were about to go out, Rinpoche looked up and suddenly stopped in his tracks as he let out a surprised sound. "What's wrong?" The Empress turned to look at him, followed his gaze, and saw that there were some engravings on the ceiling that was illuminated by the fire. "This seems to be a map." Rinpoche looked at it carefully. "Your Majesty, could this be a map of that area?" If the map outside was a map of the 60,000 mountains, then it was highly likely that this was a map of the area where humans once lived. "Get someone to copy it later," the Empress said softly. After looking at the 2 jade scrolls, the Empress felt a little heavy and wanted to leave this place. After everyone left, Tong Jinya asked, "Your Majesty, do you want to let the other officials know about this?" Exinja informed the 2 elders, the 6 ministers, and the general-in-chief who supports the nation to come over. The Empress then said, "They must know." They had to see the illusion in the secret room and these 2 jade scrolls so that they would know what had happened in the past and what would happen in the future. In particular, they had to know about the tragic war in the illusion. Chapter 854. The 2 elders, the 6 ministers, and the general-in-chief who supports the nation, Hongwu, and everyone else were still wondering what had happened when they arrived. After all, the Empress rarely summoned everyone at this time. They were even more puzzled when they found out that it was about the building beneath the Emperor's bedroom. After all, they knew that the Empress's bedroom had collapsed. They knew that it had collapsed on the night of their wedding night. They knew that something had been found beneath the Emperor's bedroom. After all, the Empress didn't order anyone to keep this a secret. She wanted everyone to know that the Emperor's bedroom had collapsed because of the building beneath it and that it had nothing to do with her. What exactly was beneath the Emperor's bedroom? What could make the Empress mobilize so many people? However, when they came out of the tombs, all of them seemed to be in a daze. The impact of the illusion was too great. Now, they no longer had any doubts about what the Empress had said. They were even more worried about the potential enemies of the human race. No one said things like, "Since the human race has been developing here for so many years, we won't attract the retaliation of those unknown races if we continue to stay here." The Aboriginals had always been a very headstrong race. Knowing where the enemy was and killing them all was the style of the Aboriginals. Furthermore, anyone who could reach the cardinal heaven level was an outstanding talent. Seeing such a vast world, everyone was even more shocked. Then, they felt a sense of heroism. There was no one who did not yearn for such a magnificent world. The only thing that made everyone doubt was that the enemy this time was too strong. In that illusion, the Kismet Heaven experts were only the most ordinary soldiers, and the Cardinal Heaven experts were only equivalent to the elite winged cavalry warriors. On that tragic battlefield, there were many Cardinal Heaven experts. Also, no one knew if that expert who could create a huge fireball was at the top of the longevity heaven or higher. In short, after thousands of years, the human race had not become stronger because of their reproduction. Instead, they had become weaker. "Sirs, Her Majesty invites everyone to Zichin Palace Hall for dinner," Exinja said as she waited for everyone to arrive. "Please lead the way, Commander." Zichin Palace Hall didn't have a table for 1 or 2 people like in formal banquets. Instead, there was a big pot on the table. The water inside was constantly boiling, and some ingredients were floating up and down. The cauldron was surrounded by plates filled with meat, fresh vegetables, and fruits. There was also a famous dish from Earth, pickled cabbage. "Sit down and have your dinner first," the Empress said with a plate in one hand and a pair of chopsticks in the other. Everyone looked at each other. Even though Rinpoche and the Empress often ate hot pot, the Empress basically didn't allow anyone to dine in the palace. Occasionally, the banquets she gave were formal ones. Naturally, everyone had never eaten hot pot before. "Take a seat. It's more convenient to talk this way," the Water Empress said. Rinpoche ignored them and poured 2 plates of meat into the pot. He was prepared to strike first and gain the upper hand. The main reason was that it was too stressful to eat with a group of Cardinal Heaven experts. If he didn't make the first move, he would probably only be able to lick the plates. Everyone sat down and imitated the actions of the Empress and Rinpoche. They scooped out the food from the pot to eat. At first, they were rather shy. After a short while, even the doddering Shi Qing's hand speed was like that of a great sorcerer who had been single for 60 years. Shi Qing picked up a piece of pork rib with his chopsticks and smiled at everyone like a blooming chrysanthemum. His face seemed to be saying, "I'm old. Give in to me. Don't fight with me." Everyone smiled at him and said, "Please enjoy, great elder." Shi Qing nodded in satisfaction. Just as he picked up the pork rib, someone beside him snatched it away with a pair of chopsticks. "Thank you, great elder," Rinpoche said gratefully. Fortunately, Shi Qing was at the table. Even though he was the great elder, he wasn't very strong and was about the same level as Rinpoche. Rinpoche could only snatch some food from him. Other than that, Rinpoche didn't even have the chance to pick up his chopsticks. Everyone pounded their stomachs before the Empress said, "What do you think after reading it? I have heard from all the officials below. This is what Her Majesty said, right? The human race was driven over. There is another world on the other side of the 60,000 mountains, and there are tens of thousands of races living there." Hongwu put down his chopsticks and smiled. "I originally thought that after conquering the Yun nation, Great Xia could barely take care of itself, and that I could live in peace for some time. Now that I have a new goal, I feel my blood boiling again. I would like to request to be transferred to the 60,000 mountains to guard the border for Her Majesty and open up a path. I want to see if those foreign races are really that powerful. There's no need to doubt them. The few that we met in the 60,000 mountains were all equivalent to Cardinal Heaven experts," Rinpoche said as he ate. "And from the illusions, it seems that the outsiders are stronger than us. There's no doubt about that. I learned from the herdsmen that this is a barren land. Since they banished us humans to this place, there must be a reason behind it. After so many years, Spirit Wheel and Cardinal Heaven experts have become experts, and it is almost impossible to see anyone above this level, which proves this point. What's the reason? I find it strange as well. In the illusion, the human race wasn't considered weak, and there were many Cardinal Heaven and Spirit Wheel experts. Tu Wan raised her head and asked. They lack something. It could be spiritual energy, the vitality of heaven and earth, or something else. There must be something missing here. Therefore, after so many years, the number of humans has increased from 100,000 to hundreds of millions, but their strength hasn't improved. Instead, it has regressed, Rinpoche said resolutely. In addition, don't think that they can forget about us. There are still people in the 60,000 mountains who are monitoring us. Those herdsmen are responsible for this responsibility. Many people put down their chopsticks after hearing what he said. After so many years, the human race has become weaker while they are recuperating. The enemy is strong and we are weak. How can we go back? These Aboriginal bigwigs finally felt like they were being beaten. In the past, it was always the Aboriginals who beat the other countries and crushed them with their strength. Now, they were being crushed by others, and they were at their wits' end. In terms of numbers, there were countless races in that world. In terms of strength, they couldn't be compared. As time passed, the gap was gradually widening. Will they also attack each other? Qin Chuan suddenly asked. It's possible, but we can't expect them to become weaker than us after so many years. It's like a war between two countries. We can't expect the other country to suddenly erupt in civil strife and then kill itself, right? It's not impossible. Qin Chuan laughed. Isn't Great Xia playing itself to death? If we don't return to that world, we won't be able to recover to our former glory. However, when we return, the other races will still be eyeing us covetously, and we won't even be able to stand firm. This situation is indeed difficult to deal with. Zhao Prince Consort, I'm afraid we will have to rely on those strange tools of yours. Shi Qing smiled at Rinpoche. Rinpoche nodded and said, technology does need to be developed. Weapons. Actually, I didn't want to develop weapons at first. After all, the disadvantage of having fewer Aboriginals will be magnified in the face of guns and cannons. However, under such circumstances, weapons must be developed. Rinpoche felt that no matter how powerful the other party was, as long as they gathered their troops, 10 little fatties would be enough to make them piss blood. If 10 wasn't enough, then 10 more would be enough. There was nothing that a nuclear bomb couldn't destroy. If there was, then the yield wasn't large enough and the quantity wasn't large enough. However, there are two problems. First, the development of technology requires the advancement of the entire society's technology to a certain level, and the people's understanding of technology must reach a certain level. This is the foundation. We can't build spaceships while the entire country is still in a primitive society. All aspects of technology are interrelated and promote each other. We must start immediately to raise the cultural level of the people. Education for all is imperative. Rinpoche and the Empress looked at each other. They didn't expect this matter to be raised so quickly. The other thing is the experts. Weapons may not be able to eliminate the experts of the other party. In fact, we may not even have the chance to use our weapons when the experts of the other party launch a surprise attack. We must have experts of the same level to restrain the other party. I'm afraid this is even more difficult than creating Big Ivan. After all, with the popularization of technology and culture, technology will always improve. Even if it takes a few decades or 100 years, we will eventually achieve our goal. As for experts who can contend with the experts of the other party can't be accumulated over time, especially when we are in a land of exile. We may never be able to produce experts who can contend with the other party. Chapter 855. They didn't discuss much during the hot pot meal. Rinpoche proposed universal education, but other than the Empress, no one else understood the importance of universal education. Their thinking was still at the stage of one-man workshops. Rinpoche and the student from the academy could handle high-end things, and they could even recruit more disciples. Not only did they understand, but many people also wouldn't let their children learn things that weren't of much use. For the common people, steam engines, internal combustion engines, gunpowder propulsion, and nuclear fission were too far away. They were so far away that they didn't even want to know what they were. Practicing martial arts was the right way. Not to mention that martial arts experts could enter the imperial court. They could also go hunting, which would at least ensure their own survival. It wasn't a problem for individuals to think this way. However, at the national level, if everyone thought this way, then there would be a big problem. According to the normal development of society, this period couldn't be estimated. It was unknown how many years had passed in this world for the productivity of society to reach this level. At most, it was at the level of the Song dynasty, and it wasn't even as prosperous. Rinpoche even wanted to use educational incentives to reward people with money or food for every completed year of courses. This way, the people who could only see what was in front of them would have a little interest in learning. It wasn't derogatory to only see what was in front of them, but rather the limitations of this era. Under the circumstances where ordinary people couldn't even guarantee their survival, only what was in front of them was the most important. Rinpoche wanted to use incentives to increase people's interest in learning, but the biggest problem was that he didn't have enough money. Although they had conquered the entire Yun nation, they didn't plunder wantonly in order to rule the region. Although they had plundered a lot of money, it only filled the national treasury, which had always been tearfully invested. Compared to Dayo's previous national treasury income, there were too many things to do. The financial and material resources consumed by road construction alone weren't small, which couldn't support Rinpoche's ideas at all. Therefore, the primary goal was to make money. The prerequisite for making money was to have a stable Yun nation. In the end, it came back to the point that the Yun nation had to be completely stabilized before vigorously developing the economy, education, and productivity to achieve a stage of overall prosperity before the next step could be carried out. This time, it was different from the past. This time, the 6 ministers and the 2 elders understood the significance and future direction of the Yun nation, so there wouldn't be any obstacles in the implementation of various matters. Finally, there's the matter I mentioned before, experts. In a situation where technology hasn't reached the stage where it can crush an individual in all aspects, top-notch experts are indispensable. Their role is undoubtedly huge. Ren Baqian brought up the past again. Qin Chuan was the first to pat his chest and say, "It's enough that we have the sons of the Aboriginals. Once we've broken through the 60,000 mountains, we'll think of a way to find a deserted place and send experts there to train. Since our ancestors could do it, we can definitely do it too." The others also nodded their heads, obviously agreeing with this statement. I can't deny that the ancient race is very powerful, but could the Aboriginals defeat all the other races by themselves? With a population of more than 10 million, and in a situation where they were far behind, they were able to produce a high-end force that was enough to fight against the myriad races. If the myriad races were so easy to deal with, the human race wouldn't have been forced to come here in the first place. Do you have the confidence that you can reach the level of the person who can make a big fireball in the illusion? Except for Her Majesty, Ren Baqian said as he patted the back of the Empress's hand. Your Majesty's talent is unquestionable. Even in this land of exile, Your Majesty can break through at any time. Given Your Majesty's age, it wouldn't be inappropriate to say that Your Majesty is the most talented person in thousands of years. However, is it enough for you to fight alone? To face the myriad races that have lived for an unknown period of time and have a complete inheritance? Or do you want to see Her Majesty risk her life by herself? Zhao Prince Consort, tell me what you think. Shi Qing smiled as he had already guessed what Ren Baqian was going to say. Although the ordinary humans aren't very strong, there will still be outstanding people among them. Furthermore, their base number is higher, and the number of people with high awareness is also not small. I remember that only Her Majesty and the Great General are among the top 10 experts, right? That's because there are many Aboriginal experts in the mountains, and no one knows about them. Qin Chuan immediately retorted. Of course, this is one of the reasons, but how many of those experts are there? Although the 60,000 mountains are dangerous, it's also a treasure trove. Are there more Aboriginal experts in the mountains than in the world? As long as the Aboriginals enter the cardinal heaven level, they won't be weaker than ordinary spirit wheel experts, and can even fight 1 against 2. Qin Chuan seemed to feel that Ren Baqian was underestimating the Aboriginals and was rather angry. What about Li Yuanzhu? Apart from Her Majesty, who else can compete with her? What about the ball-kicking monster? There's also the second most powerful expert in the world who has been missing for a long time. You want to subdue those experts? The Empress frowned slightly. She didn't know about the others, but she had seen Li Yuanzhu before and had a deep impression of her. It's not impossible. In addition to those well-known experts, there are also those young experts who have emerged. They aren't weak, and if given the opportunity, they may be able to grow to a very high level. There are even some who are talented, but have been overlooked. Even if they can't become experts, they can still become warriors, Ren Baqian said faintly. Don't forget that if we fail to return to that land, we may not have the chance to start again. Back then, they were forced to suffer heavy losses, and the human race still had experts in charge, so they banished us here. Now, they have long since recuperated, and the strength of the human race is getting weaker. If we go back, they may not just banish us back here. Therefore, this concerns all the Aboriginals and the entire human race. As long as we set foot on that path, there is no room for retreat. Therefore, we need every bit of strength we have. The Aboriginals are part of the human race. I am, and so are they. Even though Ren Baqian's speech couldn't be considered impassioned, it was resolute and decisive, and everyone began to ponder over it. Are you going to leak the information about the Wan tribe? The Empress asked. Ren Baqian shook his head and replied, Not for the time being and not now. However, we can leak it to a few people, such as the ball-kicking monster and Li Yuanzhu. Putting aside the ball-kicking monster, Li Fu had completely become a ball-kicking monster. The others might also have doubts. After all, there were some martial arts techniques passed down from ancient times, but there were almost no other records of them. If we can get the support of these top experts, the chances of subduing other experts will be much higher. Besides, we can also use some other methods, such as holding a martial arts competition to select young experts and seedlings from all of Dayo, including the Jing tribe and the Yun nation. We need to carry out two things at the same time. On the one hand, we need to increase productivity and let more people leave the most basic production activities to become the cornerstone of the technological explosion. This is culture. On the other hand, we need to select those talented experts and seedlings to cultivate high-end combat power. This is culture. What other ideas do you have? The Empress looked at the others. I'm afraid that some of them have ulterior motives, Shurqing said. There are so many experts, and many of them had strange methods, both good and evil. Not to mention whether or not they could be subdued. He was afraid that some of them might have ulterior motives, which would cause considerable trouble. It might even cause considerable damage. Among those experts, some of them are relatively neutral and will naturally be the primary target. We can contact those who are uncertain about their good or evil behavior. As for those who are too evil, we can kill them directly. What about Great Xia and the Qin nation? Han Wu suddenly asked. In fact, these two countries were very important. Not only did they have vast land, various minerals, but they also had a large population base. However, it was obviously unwise to have any ideas about these two countries before they absorbed the Yun nation. Besides, there were other ways to obtain the minerals and population of these two countries besides occupying them. For example, economic plunder and talent absorption. Chapter 856. After the crowd dispersed, Rinpoche held the Empress's hand and walked around the palace. Dayo at night was much more comfortable than during the day. After the sun fell to the horizon, the temperature began to drop, and a cool breeze blew, making people feel relaxed and happy. You have a lot of things to do. The Empress's voice was faint and a little emotional. Capable people do more work. Rinpoche chuckled. But I don't seem to have anything to do. Those who work hard govern others, and those who work hard govern others. Rinpoche immediately changed his tune. Are you a laborer? The Empress asked with a smile on her face. Definitely. You just said that capable people do more work. I'm a capable person among the workers. Rinpoche laughed. This wasn't a problem at all. However, Rinpoche did have a lot of things to do now. The academy couldn't be delayed, and he had to choose the breakthrough point in science and technology. After all, according to Dayo's current level, it would take at least a few decades of accumulation to fully promote scientific and technological progress. Therefore, it could only be promoted by human intervention. In addition, he had to pay attention to the situation in the Yun nation, find ways to make money to fill the national treasury, prepare for the world martial arts competition, and plan for the new city. In the future, he would have to pay attention to the experts in the world. In fact, if the tasks were spread out, it wouldn't be a lot. However, there was no one who could be of great use. The big shots in the imperial court ran faster than the other when they were asked to chop people with axes. They hadn't lost in fighting, and they hadn't lost in chopping either. If they were asked to do these messy things, they had to be prepared to be screwed up by them. Rinpoche had to take care of things first and then slowly spread them out. The two of them chatted for a while and stopped talking as they enjoyed the company around them. After a long time, the Empress sighed slightly and said, "You have worked hard. How could she not know about the current situation?" However, there was really no one available for these things. Rinpoche squeezed her palm. "It's nothing. I'm also very curious about that land. Besides, my lifespan can be extended after breaking through. With my talent, I was lucky to reach the spirit wheel level, and it's very difficult to reach a higher level. When I get there, it will be easier for me to break through, and I can accompany your majesty more." The two of them circled around and returned to the temporary palace. "Your majesty, let's rest," Rinpoche said as he put his arm around the Empress's waist. "Aren't you going to sleep in the outer room?" The Empress squinted her eyes and looked at him. "My kidneys aren't weak anymore. I think we can continue to make babies." Rinpoche laughed. He had no choice as the Empress was too alluring. If he were to sleep with her on the same bed, he was afraid that his old waist wouldn't be able to take it. I'm already pregnant with a child. The Empress took off her red veil and hung it on the rack. Rinpoche's eyes widened. This was only one time. Fine, it was one big time, and there were many small times in between. But how could it be so fast? And you already know that in just a few days? Of course, I know my body well. The Empress looked a little shy. When I was on Earth, I already knew that if I wanted to conceive a child, I had to control ovulation. I could still do this little trick, and at that time, I also borrowed the effect of the first dual cultivation. Rinpoche was dumbstruck. He had never heard that one could master such a technique after practicing. This had never been written in any of the Xianxia or Xuanhuan novels. Besides, didn't the Aboriginals have difficulty reproducing? In terms of self-control, there aren't many people in this world who can compare to me, the Empress casually said after hearing Rinpoche's question. Rinpoche felt that the Empress was indeed a cheat. Not only was his cultivation speed fast, his cultivation base was also rising every day. Apart from watching television dramas and drinking, his control over his body was also far superior to others. If those who train their bodies every day were to find out about this, they would probably want to die. His mind was in a mess like a herd of wild horses. After a while, he came back to his senses. The Empress was pregnant. He was going to be a father? Oh my God! I wasn't even mentally prepared for this. How? How could he be a father? How could it be so fast? He had just gotten married and hadn't brushed his teeth yet. Rinpoche lay on the bed in a daze. He slowly calmed down as he smelled the delicate fragrance of the Empress. If she was pregnant, then so be it. He was going to be a father. He originally felt that this was a distant matter, but he didn't expect it to happen so soon. As for how to raise the child, he didn't need to worry about this. Wouldn't it take at least 9 or 10 months for a child to be born? He should be able to prepare after such a long period of time. Well, wasn't it 9 months for the Aboriginals to give birth? He had to ask tomorrow. Not long after, the Empress grabbed Rinpoche's mischievous hand. What are you doing? I'm just touching. Aren't you just touching? I'm just rubbing. Creak, creak, creak. Not long after, the wooden couch began to creak, and it became more and more intense. Hey, be gentle, Your Majesty. You're still calling me Your Majesty? It's better to call me Your Majesty. Rinpoche groaned. Compared to a name, he preferred to call her Your Majesty. The sense of accomplishment of hugging the monarch of a nation was overflowing. Aren't you the wildest horse? Boom! The couch collapsed again. The red curtain was like a ball of flame, rolling in the room. Isn't Her Majesty going to court again? Many officials who were waiting in front of the palace heard the news from Xianxia and whispered to each other. In particular, those who entered the palace yesterday wanted to bring up some things in court today, but didn't expect to hear this news. Where's Her Majesty? Hong Wu asked with a frown. Get lost. Xianxia's answer was full of realism, and these 3 words described the scene vividly. After finishing her sentence, she cupped her hands at everyone and turned to return to the palace. Only the crowd was left with a blank look on their faces. After all, they didn't know what getting lost meant. That night, there was a rumble in the palace. Qing Yuan and Hong Wan rushed over to take a look and were on the verge of tears. Her Majesty's temporary resting place had collapsed again. Why was it faster than the previous time? Where's Her Majesty? Her Majesty has gone to Chongqing Palace. Xianxia appeared beside them and said faintly. Another day passed. Many officials stood in front of the palace and waited for the news that the Empress wouldn't be attending court today. Shi Qing's expression changed for a long time before he finally laughed bitterly. After a day of not having morning court, everyone roughly understood what was going on. This was already the second time this had happened. Why do I feel that? Zhao Prince Consort is harming the nation. Tong Jinye smacked his lips. The surroundings were instantly cleared. Although he wasn't the only one who had this thought, everyone immediately distanced themselves from him. That night, following the sound of collapse, Xianxia stood in front of the ruins of Chongqing Palace. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, and she had a strange expression on her face. It was as if she was curious. A red shadow drilled into an empty palace and wriggled on the ground like a red cocoon. We can't stay in the palace anymore. 2 of the palaces have collapsed. What should we do? Rin Bachien panted heavily. Chapter 857. After another 2 days, Rin Bachien walked out of the palace while trembling with his hands on his waist. Seeing the sun that he hadn't seen for a long time, he felt like he had just survived a disaster. Other than surviving a calamity, there was also a guilty conscience. I've already restrained my strength, the Water Empress said apologetically as she walked out from behind Rin Bachien. He had indeed held back, or else his hip bone would have been broken into 18 pieces. But that wasn't the problem. Rin Bachien felt that he would be blown away by a gust of wind. Even his bone marrow would drop by half a kilogram. Your Majesty, Your Highness, lunch is ready. Would you like to eat now? Qing Yuan asked with her head lowered. Send it to... The Empress looked around. She couldn't stay in this palace anymore. It was as if a road roller had run over it. Furthermore, this palace might collapse at any moment. Send it to Yaohua Palace and have someone clean it up. Hong Wan, go inform the clinic. Then, with a slight headache, he said, It is indeed time to build a new palace. The roaring emperor had dug the bottom of the palace like a sieve. It wouldn't be a problem if it was a normal residence, but if there were other circumstances, it might collapse at any time. They couldn't possibly collapse every few days, right? Let's eat first. Rin Bachien really didn't have the energy to think about the new palace and the new city. Both of them arrived at Yaohua Palace. Rin Bachien looked at the surroundings. Many places were decorated with pink, and there were even some clay figurines. He couldn't help but ask, Are there people living here? One had to know that the 2 previous emperors of the Aboriginals didn't have many palaces and 6 courtyards, and they had very few children. Most of the palaces in the palace that they took over after purchasing the Hao Nation were empty. Although there would be people cleaning up the empty palaces, they wouldn't do it too often. It was inevitable that they would accumulate dust. Moreover, since no one lived in them for a long time, the palaces were rather cold and gloomy, and some were even dilapidated. However, this hall of fragrance looked different. It seemed like someone cleaned it every day. Rin Bachien turned his head and saw a porcelain vase with a flower in it on a table. The Empress looked at the decorations around her with a look of reminiscence in her eyes and said, I used to live here when I was young. In the past few years, I would often come back to take a look. It's just that I haven't come back as often in the past 2 years. But the decorations are the same as when I was young. Even the flowers in the vase are the same. Your Majesty used to like pink? I thought Your Majesty always liked red. Pink doesn't suit me, the Empress said faintly. Rin Bachien understood. Pink was the color of young girls. Since the Empress was in this position, she naturally couldn't act the same as before. Especially at that time, she was just a young girl who didn't know anything. Let's use this place as my bedroom for now. Dig up the ground of the collapsed palace and rebuild it. If this place is destroyed, His Majesty will be distressed. Furthermore, building a new palace isn't something that can be completed in a short period of time. The Empress glared at him after he finished speaking. After eating breakfast and drinking a bowl of freshly fried basentang, Rin Bachien finally felt alive again. Looking in the mirror, he didn't lose too much weight this time. He only lost about 10 to 20 kilograms. In his body, the life force that came from the Empress had not been completely digested. This time, it had increased a little, but the amount was much less than the previous time. It was only 1/10 of the previous time. After lunch, the Empress summoned all the court officials into the palace to discuss some matters. On the other hand, Rin Bachien took out a piece of paper and a pen to list out the things that he needed to do in the near future. The first thing was education. This was the most important thing. If he wanted to expand the scope of education, it would be very difficult to do it alone. Even with the help of his students, it would still be too slow. There were dozens of students a year, and the number was increasing year by year. Even if all these students became elementary teachers, it would take at least more than 10 years for there to be enough teachers to popularize education. However, The various departments of the imperial court also lacked a large number of talents. How could they let all the students become elementary school teachers? Even so, the standard of education within a short period of time wouldn't exceed the third grade of junior high school. If he wanted to train a large number of high school talents, he would need decades of accumulation. His goal was to train a large number of junior high and even senior high school students within 10 years, as well as a portion of high school talents. To achieve this, he had to rely on some other forces. There were only a few options to rapidly spread basic education throughout Dayo in a short period of time. The first option was robots. It was now 2029 on Earth, and educational robots were already quite mature. Of course, most of the time, they were still used as assistants. Furthermore, it was difficult to reach the stage of educating high school talents. Furthermore, there was another point. If these things were broken, they couldn't be repaired. It was very difficult to rely on robots as teachers. The second option was distance education. However, the drawbacks were similar to that of robots, and it was even more troublesome. Even if he could achieve both of these, there was still a very important point. Although he could record the books he read on that planet in his sea of knowledge, it didn't mean that he was capable of educating high school level students. After thinking about it, Rinpoche put this matter aside for now and wrote down another matter. He had to embark on the path of science and technology with the characteristics of this world. This world wasn't Earth. The composition of the air was different from that of Earth, and the elements were also different. At present, he already knew that there were a few more elements than on Earth, but he didn't know if there were any missing elements. In addition, he hadn't found any traces of oil yet. This kind of situation was bound to happen again in the future. Therefore, it was impossible to completely copy technology. He had to develop a technology that was unique to this world, that was suitable for the situation in this world. After thinking about it, Rinpoche wrote the word kidnap on the paper. That's right, kidnap people from Earth, set up a laboratory, study the differences between this world and Earth, and develop a replacement or similar technology. After all, he couldn't completely rely on the Research Institute on Earth. Moreover, there was another advantage to doing this, and that was that these high-end talents that they had kidnapped could teach students at the level of a university or even higher. In that case, he had to have a capable helper on Earth. It couldn't be Renwan Yin or Ding Jie, as they couldn't do this kind of thing. It also couldn't be the winged cavalry. First of all, this person couldn't be too eye-catching. At least, he couldn't look like someone from the Zenith Star. Second, he had to have enough wisdom and action to do things well. Finally, he had to be quite skilled. The winged cavalry couldn't meet the first two requirements. Rinpoche already had a candidate in mind, but he had to meet him first. After sending him there, he wouldn't be able to come back. This was the only way he could completely control him. The third thing was to expand the scale of the embroidered uniform guards in the rearguard commandery, as they were currently understaffed. Next, in addition to the situation in the Yun Nation and Tianjin Basin, he had to investigate the various sects and experts in the world and collect talented young people. The fourth point was to make money, which was actually relatively easy. The fifth point was to choose a location for the new palace in the capital city and carry out planning. This was difficult for others, especially when planning the new palace in the capital city, which needed to be considered in all aspects. However, Rinpoche felt that this was simply too easy for him. As long as he chose a location and made a similar image of the planet in his mind, he could build it at will and see the results. It was even easier than using a computer to make renderings. The sixth point was to investigate all the mineral resources in Dayo and the Yun Nation, make arrangements, and expand production. The steam equipment in the mines also needed to be developed. After all, manpower was precious, and there were too many places that required manpower. Chapter 858. In the 60,000 Mountains. A few figures stood at the top of the mountain and looked down at a giant beast that was running. It was 8 meters tall and was at the peak of the earth wheel level. In most places, it was at the top of the food chain. After all, beasts with the strength of a spirit wheel expert were the overlords of the 60,000 mountains and were rare. However, the giant beast below was fleeing in panic, as if it was being chased by something. A figure that was smaller than the giant beast did a somersault in the air and landed on its back. At the same time, he slammed his right hand down. The giant beast let out a wail as its limbs could no longer support its body. It collapsed and slid on the ground for dozens of meters before coming to a stop. Following that, several figures jumped down from the mountain and appeared beside the giant beast in a few flashes. A woman with a furry tail stepped forward to cut up the beast while the others did their own things. These figures were from the foreign races that Rinpoche had met once before. There was Qiao San from the Heaven Seeker race with a cat-like beard and round nose, Lei Hua from the Thunder Barbarian race with 2 horns on his head, Gu Ling from the 8-armed race with 4 arms, Sun Yu from the Baixiang race with a furry tail, Ta Lan from the Wind-chasing race with 2 hooves, Su Hong from the Void race with growth rings on his penis, and Lu Sheng from the Snake race with a snake's tail and a human body. Lei Hua stood on the corpse of the giant beast and looked around. "Did you find anything?" Qiao Sun asked. "It's a little familiar." Lei Hua was delighted. "I've been here before. It should be close to my tribe." Although nearly 100 years had passed, everyone only had memories of the past 6 months, and those memories seemed to be from a year ago. The 4-armed Gu Ling's eyes flickered. Since this place wasn't far from the Thunder Barbarian village, it wouldn't be too far from the 8-armed race's village either. "Congratulations to the 2 of you." Qiao Sun smiled at them. "Thank you." Both of them thanked Qiao Sun solemnly. If it weren't for him, they didn't know how long it would take for them to find their original range of activity. Next, they started a fire to roast the meat. Everyone was silent, and Lei Hua and Gu Ling were even more distracted. After 100 years, they could finally go home. The 2 of them were eager to return home and couldn't wait to go back and have a look. At the same time, he was a little nervous. He didn't know what had changed in the village in the past 100 years. After everyone finished their meal, Lei Hua stood up and said, "Everyone, I will take my leave first. If we meet again in the future, I will treat everyone to a good drink." Everyone nodded and smiled. Gu Ling also cupped his hands at the crowd. Then he looked at Lei Hua and said, "If we meet again in the future, we will fight to the death." The hatred between the 2 clans was not something that could be easily erased. Lei Hua immediately laughed heartily. "As you wish." The 2 of them didn't say anything else and left in a flash. Although they had similar encounters and had been working together for more than 8 months, they were only a little more familiar with each other. They were not that close. After all, these 7 people belonged to different races, and they were all experts. To be able to stay by the herdsman's side for so long, they were all extremely talented people. They were originally favored by the heavens in their strongholds. It was already rare for them to be able to work together for so long. It would be more difficult to warm up to them. After the 2 of them left, the remaining people felt even more anxious. According to the distance, this place should not be too far from their homes. Everyone looked at Qiao. Senator Qiao Sun casually picked up a branch beside him and threw it into the air. When it landed, he pointed in a direction. "Let's go this way." Lei Hua climbed over a few mountains. The surrounding scenery became more and more familiar. He felt more and more anxious, as if something was about to jump out of his heart. "Roar!" Lei Hua let out a loud roar. A moment later, a voice came from the top of the mountain. "Who is it?" Lei Hua felt his chest beating violently. He couldn't wait to brag. In a few flashes, he arrived at the top of the mountain. However, what greeted him was the sound of weapons tearing through the air. "It's me." "Stop!" Lei Hua immediately shouted. A bone rod stopped not far from him. A few men and women looked at him from afar and revealed puzzled expressions. "Who are you?" There were only about 200 people in the Thunder Barbarian tribe. It was impossible that they didn't know anyone. Lei Hua stared at one of them. Lei. He felt that the person in front of him was familiar, but he was older than he remembered. As for the others, he didn't know any of them. They seemed to be the new generation in recent years. 100 years was a lifetime for humans. It was also a long time for the Thunder Barbarian tribe. Who are you? The person who answered was a woman. She was naked and only wore a leather skirt. Her face was full of doubt. I'm Lei Hua. I'm back. Lei Lei's face revealed an ecstatic expression. Lei Hua, Lei Lei muttered softly. Then, her face was full of disbelief. Lei Hua, that's right. It's me. Where have you been all these years? Lei Lei's eyes widened. She carefully sized Lei Hua up and down. Then, hatred appeared on her face. Why did you suddenly leave 117 years ago? 117 years. Lei Hua was slightly stunned. He thought that it had been more than 70 years. He didn't expect it to be more than 110 years. It seemed that the time when everyone was captured was very different. Then, her face turned slightly gloomy. It's a long story. I was captured. Let's go back to the village first. After a while, Lei Hua arrived in front of a village. Without waiting for anyone else, he immediately rushed in a certain direction. In the village, there were pointy buildings that were completely different from those of the aboriginals. They were scattered throughout the village. In fact, the beasts were not much of a threat to the Thunder Barbarians. The so-called village was just a settlement without walls. Lei was stopped in front of a house. It was the most familiar place in his memory. However, when he pushed the door open and rushed into the house, he saw an unfamiliar young man. Lei's expression changed. Where's Lei Duo? The young man looked at him blankly. Who's Lei Duo? Lei's body suddenly froze. Then his skin turned green, and a ferocious expression appeared on his face. I'm asking you where Lei Duo is. Lei Hua. Lei rushed into the house. Your sister is dead. She died more than 80 years ago. What? Lei Hua was stunned, as if he had been struck by lightning. She thought that you were harmed by the 8-arm race. In order to avenge you, she fought with the 8-arm race many times. In the end, she died in battle, Lei said with an ugly expression. What did you say? Lei Hua asked in a daze. Lei's expression seemed to be frozen on his face. However, his aura rose, and the green color on his body became darker. There were even electric currents appearing on the surface of his skin. Calm down. You should meet the elder first, Lei said. Her expression was a little gloomy. In the past, she had a good relationship with Lei Hua and Lei Duo. When Lei Hua had disappeared, she had been sad for a period of time. Lei Duo had died in battle, and she wanted to avenge her. However, she was still too weak. Or rather, Gu Zhen was too strong. However, the most important thing now was to calm Lei Hua down. 8-arm race. Lei Hua let out an angry roar. Electric currents flowed along his skin and hit the wooden plank beside his feet. The wooden plank started to smoke. To others, Lei Duo was someone from more than 80 years ago. However, to him, it was as if he had only left for a year. When Lei Hua saw this, he was pleasantly surprised and sorrowful. He was pleasantly surprised that Lei Hua had comprehended Thunderflow. He might even be able to defeat Gu Zhen. Lei Hua's talent was indeed the best. If he had not left, the Thunder Barbarians would not have been suppressed for decades. He was sorrowful that he had returned too late. The dead would not be able to live. Chapter 859. Lei Hua did not have the chance to vent his anger. After all, the news of his return to the village had already reached the ears of the elders along with the other young men. A moment later, he appeared in a house, and around him were a few old men with wrinkles all over their faces. Above them was a dignified Thunder Barbarian. Lei Hua, I didn't expect you to be alive. You said you were captured? What happened? Who did it? An old man asked in a deep voice. Although the old men's faces were wrinkled, they all looked ferocious. Blue veins bulged on their exposed skin. They're called herdsmen. Lei Hua told them what he knew and what had happened along the way. Herdsmen? What's that? I've heard of the Heaven Hunters, the Wind Chasers, and the Void Tribe. But where did these herdsmen come from? Why haven't I heard of them? And what method did they use to capture Lei Hua? No matter where they came from, as long as we catch them, we must avenge them. That's right. How dare they capture people of our Thunder Barbarian tribe? If we find them, we must not let them go. That girl called Guna was also captured. She actually came back alive. Human tribe? Abandoned tribe? I haven't heard any news about the human tribe for a long time. It said that they're a weak, treacherous, despicable, and treacherous race. Gunnar from the Ba tribe and Gujun. Now, the Ba tribe has two geniuses. So what if they have two geniuses? I see that Lei Hua has just comprehended Thunderflow. He can fight against Gujun. Gunnar was originally weaker than Lei Hua. Even if she came back to life, Lei Hua will still be far behind her. The burly man sitting at the head of the table seemed to have lost his soul. After a while, he opened a wooden board and found a book made of animal skin. Sure enough, there are herdsmen in this book. The burly man flipped through the book and laughed. I remember seeing this somewhere. Then he frowned. Herdsmen, following orders to monitor the abandoned people? Strange abilities, belonging to the six heavens? Why are there only a few words? The abandoned people retreated to the barren land, never to return for thousands of years. This is the book passed down from generation to generation, right? Who are the six heavens? Return to what? What does it say? The few old men immediately asked. I don't know. The next page was torn off. The patriarch of the Thunder Barbarian tribe touched his head and smiled bitterly. Who is so daring? You even dare to tear the clan heirloom that has been passed down from generation to generation? By the time I got it, it was already gone. Who knows which clan leader tore it apart? But there's one thing we can be sure of. The herdsman is probably monitoring the abandoned people, and those abandoned people seem to be related to us. I remember that when I took over the position of patriarch, that old man told me something. The burly man crossed his arms and thought hard, but he couldn't remember what he had been told. Pass down my orders. In the future, if you see those things called herdsmen, immediately report to me. Since they dare to touch our lightning barbarians, we can't let them go. In the largest house of the Ba tribe, a woman with 6 arms sat and listened to Gunnar's report. After listening, she said faintly, I didn't expect you to encounter these people and those abandoned people. You said that they have a powerful weapon, right? Although I haven't seen it before, I saw the aftermath of the weapon's destruction. Not a single blade of grass grew within a radius of more than a kilometer, and everything was turned into ashes. Those abandoned people have actually grown up again. No matter what, it seems like they have completely forgotten what happened back then. However, I'm afraid they will be aware of it this time. Back then, you don't need to know about this. You may leave. The 6-armed woman waved her hand. After Gunnar left, she said faintly, I don't know if we will return to the legendary ancestral land. If those abandoned people really come back, maybe we will have a chance to go back. In that case, I should be hoping that they come back. Under the protection of the guards, Rinpoche arrived near Jing Street. He looked at the homecoming tavern in front of him, waved his hand, and said, Wait for me outside. There was a row of iron crotches in front of the tavern. He didn't know how that egg-kicking maniac got mixed up with the cross-dresser and was in cahoots with each other. One was in charge of egg-kicking, and the other was in charge of selling iron crotches. Rinpoche felt that Li Fu was simply a disgrace among the top experts. Lady Boss, there's a guest. Come out and receive the guest, Rinpoche shouted as soon as he entered the tavern. Oh, there's a distinguished guest today. Isn't this Zhao, Prince Consort? How do you want me to receive the guest? How did you lose so much weight? Ning Kai-chun, who was swaying her body, walked out from inside. She was wearing a purple robe, and her hair was tied up in a great xia bun with a pink flower on it. Her eyes seemed to be filled with water, and she was extremely charming. After not seeing her for a long time, Ning Kai-chun was still a cross-dresser who looked more like a woman than a woman. Furthermore, it seemed like she had improved. However, Rinpoche's face darkened after hearing her words. How did she lose so much weight? It was a long story. Rinpoche sighed slightly and looked around. There was a wooden bottle on every table with a bouquet of flowers in it. The entire tavern was filled with the fragrance of flowers. It had to be said that Ning Kai-chun was going further and further down the road of feminization. Your Highness, do you want to come inside and let me serve you? Ning Kai-chun sat opposite Rinpoche with a seductive look on her face, causing him to tremble on the spot. Come on. Ren Baqian quickly waved his hand. Looking at you, you seem to be doing pretty well. What do you think, sir? Ning Caichen's eyes turned red. I'm now living in seclusion, unable to return to my home, and unable to acknowledge my relatives. Does Her Highness think that I'm doing well? Ren Baqian was slightly taken aback. Do you want to return to Great Xia? It seemed normal when he thought about it. Even though Ning Caichun had become like this, it was normal for her to want to go back and take a look. Unfortunately, he couldn't go back with his original identity. He didn't expect Ning Caichun to roll her eyes and ask, "Why should I go back? That bunch of old guys are always pointing fingers at me. Now that I'm free and have the body of a woman, I'm many times happier than before. Why should I go back and take care of those old guys? Besides, if I go back, those old guys will be furious." Ren Baqian didn't understand the situation with the Ning family, but he believed the last sentence. If Ning Caichun went back with this seductive look, the ancestors of the Ning family wouldn't be able to keep their coffins closed. Are you really not going back? Ren Baqian asked with a smile. Ning Caichun felt aggrieved and replied, Of course not. Besides, I can't go back even if I want to. What I want now is to find someone to marry and then spend the rest of my life as a wife and children. However, who would dare to marry me like this? In that case, do you have any ideas of doing something for me? However, I have to leave Great Xia and even Dayo far away. I won't be able to go back in the future and completely cut myself off from my past. As for the benefits, I can make you a real woman. Before Ren Baqian could finish speaking, Ning Caichun pressed the table and stood up. Is what Zhao Prince Consort said true? She couldn't contain her excitement. She spun around on the ground twice and muttered, How is this possible? How is this possible? How is this possible? Your Highness, are you lying to me? Let me finish. Ren Baqian stretched out his hand and pressed it down. You still can't give birth, but it can make you like a woman in other aspects. Whatever a woman can do, you can also do. Whatever a woman can enjoy, you can also enjoy. In short, it will make you a real woman, except that you can't give birth. Are you really not lying to me, Your Highness? Ning Caichun was both excited and doubtful. How could this be done? Why would I lie to you? I want you to do things for me, and I can naturally do what I promised you. Otherwise, how can I let my subordinates work with peace of mind? However, the price is that you can no longer return to this land. Of course, if you do your job well, I can help you collect some materials for the sword cultivation pool so that you can nurture swords and extend your lifespan to at least the same as an ordinary person's. Before Ren Baqian could ask if she was willing, Ning Caichun hurriedly said, I'm willing. Of course I'm willing. It was as if she was afraid that he would go back on his word. Just don't regret it in the future, Ren Baqian said faintly. I won't regret it. Your Highness, you don't know what it's like to have such a body that is neither male nor female. As long as I can become a real woman, I won't regret it no matter what lies ahead. Ren Baqian looked at Ning Caichun. Earth might be a better place for Ning Caichun. Once he went there, he couldn't come back. This way, he would be in complete control because he had no other choice. In terms of strength, Ning Caichun, who had a spirit sword, wasn't weak at all and was even stronger than an ordinary earth wheel expert. In terms of temperament and wisdom, Ning Caichun wasn't bad either. All he had to do was send her to the Kingdom of Thailand. Get ready. There's no need for the things here. I'll get someone to bring you in before you arrive at the palace tonight. Your Highness, where are you going to send me? What are you going to do? Ning Caichun asked. Just now, he didn't ask what Ren Baqian wanted him to do and immediately agreed. This showed how attractive a 3-day trip to the Thai kingdom was to him. It's far away from Great Xia and Dayo. From your tone, it's not the Qin kingdom. Where would it be? You don't need to know too much now. I can tell you that the task isn't difficult. Besides, life there is much more comfortable than here. Ren Baqian smiled, got up, and walked out. Bring your spirit sword. It's called Green Bead, right? I got it. After choosing the person, there was nothing else to worry about. The next step was to decide on the Empress's relatives. After all, it was a little outrageous for the Empress to be alone. Forget about Hong Wu, Tong Jinya, and the other bastards. None of them were good people, but as long as there was one, this wedding would be ruined by them. In fact, there were only a few people to choose from: Exinja, Lin Xiaola, Qin Yuan, and Hong Wan. Now, there was Ning Kai-chen. Chapter 860. Your Majesty, Your Highness, I have brought them here. Exinja brought Ning Kai-chen, who was dressed in purple and had a sword on her back and a small bag in her hand. Seeing the Empress, Ning Kai-chen bowed slightly and used the etiquette of great Xiao women. Greetings, Your Majesty, Your Highness. The sword on her back trembled slightly. The Empress glanced at her and continued to focus on the laptop screen. Speaking of which, this laptop was a little old. Ren Baqian was checking the leather bag in his hand, which contained the medicine for the nourishing soup. The medicine couldn't be stopped. He looked up at Ning Kai-chen and said, "I'll give you one last chance to back out. I'll never regret it. So be it. In fact, the other side is pretty good. There are mobile phones, computers, comics, TV series, and movies. There are abundant resources, a rich life, and plenty of food, drinks, and entertainment," Ren Baqian said. This was indeed the case. This world couldn't be compared to Earth in terms of resources and entertainment products. Of course, this was only for now. Although she didn't know what Ren Baqian was talking about, Ning Kai-chen was even more curious about where they were going. At the same time, she was curious about the clothes they were wearing. Ren Baqian was wearing a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. The Empress was wearing a long red dress, and Qin Yuan and Hong Wan were also wearing long dresses. Their clothes looked very different from Dayo's. Ren Baqian looked up and asked, "Commander Exinja, where are your casual clothes?" Ren Baqian had bought clothes for Exinja on his previous trip to Earth. Qin Yuan and Hong Wan knew that they were going to be brought over this time, so they had already changed into their clothes. "I've buried them." Exinja pushed up her glasses. Ren Baqian was confused. What did she mean by burying them? "Forget it. Let's go like this. I'll have to get someone to send 2 sets of clothes." Not only Exinja, but also Ning Kai-chen's clothes weren't suitable. She was excited to go back to Earth to see her good friend, the Husky. However, she started to feel sleepy after 5 minutes of excitement. 10 minutes later, she was in a daze and was sitting on the ground, her head bobbing. "Caught her." Ren Baqian waved his hand. He originally wanted to get someone to cover Ning Kai-chen's eyes, but it would only take a moment. Furthermore, he would be able to guess everything after coming into contact with Earth's knowledge, so there was no need. Ren Baqian grabbed the Empress with one hand and grabbed Ning Kai-chen with the other. Then the surroundings instantly changed. Everyone had already appeared in a hotel room. This is... Ning Kai-chen widened her eyes and looked around. In an instant, everything around her had changed. The room wasn't big, but it was clean and tidy, with bright glass windows that let in the sun. In Ning Kai-chen's eyes, the hotel's decorations were luxurious. In particular, the golden wallpaper at the back of the bed was simply vulgar in Ren Baqian's eyes, but it was completely different in Ning Kai-chen's eyes. More importantly, it was clearly night just now. How did it become daytime now? Lin Xiaola, who had arrived on Earth, was also energized. She squatted on the ground and raised her head. "Oh, woof! Don't shout. Your friend isn't here." He patted her head. "Where is this?" Ning Kai-chen asked as she carefully sized up her surroundings. "You will know in the future." Ren Baqian looked at Ning Kai-chen curiously. "Green bead, how's your sword? Can you still command?" Ning Kai-chen didn't understand. She moved her fingers, and green bead sneakily flew out of the scabbard. It circled around Ning Kai-chen's waist as if trying to avoid the Empress's sight. "It seems like it hasn't been affected." Ren Baqian nodded. This was the best. The room was a suite with separate rooms. The Empress took Qin Yuan, Hong Wan, and Exinja outside to watch television, leaving Ning Kai-chen behind. Ren Baqian left her behind, went out for a walk, and bought 2 sets of clothes. Exinja wore a suit, a short skirt, and a white shirt. Ren Baqian always felt that it was more compatible with her bespectacled image. In this outfit, she was simply the best candidate for a secretary. As for Ning Kai-chen, she wore a pair of unisex clothes long pants, and a casual coat. Coupled with her seductive image, she looked quite like an older sister. The only flaw was that her chest was flat, even flatter than Lin Xiaola's. However, this wouldn't be the case after he returned from Thailand. Your Highness, where exactly is this place? I looked outside just now, and it seems to be a strange place. Anyway, it's not any place that I know of, Ning Kaichen asked after changing according to Ren Baqian's instructions. As for how they arrived here from the palace of Dayo in an instant, he kept it to himself. However, he was curious about everything he saw, especially the metal boxes running along the road below. Were all the houses in this world so tall? What was that box with images and sound coming from outside? Could there be a villain inside? If it wasn't for the faint stench in the air, he would have suspected that this was the residence of an immortal. From now on, you will live here and do what I tell you to do. You can make your own arrangements for the rest of your time. As for where this place is, you will find out in the future. Ren Baqian smiled. Although this world was very different from the other world, with his imagination, it would probably take some time for him to realize that this was a different world. He called Qing Yuan, Hong Wan, Hexen, Lin Xiaola, and Ning Kaichen together and said, "There are some matters that require you to pretend to be Her Majesty's relatives." "This, we don't dare," Qing Yuan and Hong Wan hurriedly said. Pretending to be Her Majesty's relatives was equivalent to pretending to be members of the royal family. There's nothing to be afraid of. This time, you have to pretend to be Her Majesty's relatives. Otherwise, things will be difficult to handle. This is a serious matter. Xin Zhe is Her Majesty's cousin, and the others are Her Majesty's cousins. Remember this. Also, Ning Kaichen, you will pretend to be Her Majesty's good friend. I'm climbing up the social ladder. Ning Kaichen rolled his eyes. He probably wouldn't be able to change his flirtatious attitude. If they sent him on a 3-day trip to Thailand, he would probably become a demon when he came back. What does Your Highness want us to do? Nothing much. Just hold a wedding according to the traditions of this world. That's all. All right, just remember who you are. If someone asks you, just say so. I can show you around today. Ren Baqian clapped his hands. Qing Yuan and Hong Wan immediately looked happy. They had only gone out once before and spent the rest of their time in that villa. Both of them were curious about the outside world. Xianzhe's face was expressionless, while Lin Xiaola looked drowsy. Ning Kaichen, on the other hand, was rather interested and wanted to see what kind of world it was like outside. When everyone went downstairs, the receptionist was shocked. When did so many outstanding women go up? No one thought of the girls in the small cards. After all, with their eyesight, they could tell at a glance. What made them curious was when so many outstanding women came to the hotel. After all, as long as they saw them once, they would never forget them. The hotel was in the city center, and Ren Baqian was ready to eat something first. However, he didn't go far before he saw a fight. Both of them were dressed like ordinary people, but they bumped into each other while walking. As a result, both of them were a little aggressive. "Are you blind? How can you say that? What's wrong? Damn, you're still so arrogant after bumping into me? I'll beat you up." It was basically the same as the usual, "What are you worried about? And what's wrong with looking at you?" The two of them immediately started fighting. Qing Yuan and Hong Wan didn't leave the palace often and didn't see many street fights. At this moment, they were in high spirits and immediately clapped and cheered. This was the norm in Dayo. However, this was China, and two girls clapping and cheering immediately attracted a lot of strange looks. Ren Baqian didn't care about anything else. Instead, he felt that it was interesting. It wasn't because of their strength, but because of their attitude. He felt that both of them were a little eager to give it a try, and then they started fighting. They weren't really bad-tempered, but more like they were looking for someone to test their skills. Ren Baqian stood at the side and observed that both of them were actually close to the Manwell level. Although their punches and kicks weren't very skillful, their speed and strength weren't bad. Ren Baqian was slightly surprised to see two people with such strength on the street. It was now the 4th year that China announced the 15th set of fitness qigong. To be able to have such skills in the 4th year meant that they were pretty talented and had already pulled away from ordinary people. However, after thinking about it, it seemed to be very normal. After all, the population of China was 4 times that of Great Xia. People lived in affluence and were physically strong. Compared to the malnourished people of feudal society, the probability of having talented people was naturally higher. This is an era of great change, Rinpoche muttered to himself. Fortunately, it had only been around for a short period of time, and the impact wasn't too great. When the people gradually became man-wheel experts, the far-reaching impact of fitness qigong would be seen. Chapter 861. Both of them were stronger than ordinary people, but they didn't have the same mental fortitude. In just a short while, their faces were flushed. Rinpoche could clearly see that they were starting to be a little timid. Rinpoche crossed his arms and watched for a long time to see how this matter would be resolved in the end. In other words, he wanted to see how long it would take for someone to deal with this matter. Martial artists weren't ordinary people, and their destructive power was much greater than that of ordinary people. It was fine if it wasn't for a long time, but as time went on, the strength of ordinary people would increase, and their destructive power would increase dramatically. This society had been peaceful for too long. The sudden emergence of strength would change the mentality of many ordinary people and break the current balance. Rinpoche waited to see how long it would take for the relevant agencies to appear, which represented whether the country's current preparations were complete. 3 minutes. 3 minutes after the 2 men started fighting, someone rushed over. It was a man in a dark blue uniform with a black iron plate, with the words Martial Enforcement Bureau pinned on his chest. His strength was similar to that of the 2 men. However, when he appeared, the 2 men obviously slowed down and each took a step back. "What are you doing? Private fights are strictly prohibited. What's wrong with the 2 of you? Come back to the bureau with me," the man shouted. He was the one who looked for trouble first. One of them said resentfully as blood flowed down his nose like tap water. "You obviously bumped into me first." The other man's eyes were like a panda's. Although the man's strength was similar to that of the 2 men, he grew up in a peaceful society and was obviously quite afraid of law enforcement agencies. The 2 men were quickly taken away. Rinpoche calculated that 3 minutes wasn't particularly fast, but it wasn't bad either. After all, a city was too big and the number of law enforcement personnel was limited. This speed showed that the country was quite well prepared to deal with the changes in the world. As for the Martial Enforcement Bureau, it was a newly established department that specialized in stopping martial artists from causing disturbances and arresting them. Of course, this referred to the experts at the man-will level. However, the current man-will experts were in the military in Wuji City. Therefore, the martial enforcement officers were still responsible for these trivial matters, similar to the police. After watching this sudden fight, Qing Yuan and Hong Wan were excited, while Ning Kaichen was deep in thought. It wasn't until it was time to eat that Ning Kaichen said, "The people here are very different." "What's the difference?" Rinpoche laughed. "His aura is different, and so is his attitude," Ning Kaichen said as she scanned the surroundings. "I was born in Great Xia, but I've been to the Yun Nation and stayed in Dayo for so long. Although the commoners of the Aboriginals were poor, they had the highest level of willpower, which was completely different from other places. The commoners of other places, even the commoners of Great Xia, were mostly just trying to stay alive. It seemed that their only purpose in life was to stay alive. But the ancient race is different." Upon hearing Ning Saichen's words, the Empress looked interested. She loved to hear people flattering her. Praising the Aboriginal commoners was also praising her. "However, those people I saw just now had a stronger aura than the Aboriginal commoners. I've been observing along the way. These people should be ordinary citizens, but none of them are like the ones I've seen in Great Xia and the Yun Nation. I can't say for sure, but it's very different." "Are you talking about mental outlook?" Rinpoche laughed. "It's definitely different. Almost all of the commoners here had gone to school, and all of them were at least at the level of an elementary scholar. 80% of the young and middle-aged people had the knowledge of a high scholar and were aware of what was happening all over the world. Their knowledge and thinking are superior to even the scholars, not to mention the commoners of Great Xia and the Yun nation. How is that possible? Ning Kaiqian was in disbelief. Great Xia had both civil and military examinations, so naturally there were also scholars. Ning Kaiqian was born into a wealthy family and had even passed the imperial examination. Naturally, she knew the value of a scholar and a scholar. Generally, the advisors and aides of the officials in the county were all elementary scholars. As for a scholar, they could directly become an official. In the entire Great Xia, there were more than 300 million people. Only 2 out of 10 people were literate, and among these 2 literate people, there might not even be 1 scholar. Out of 100 scholars, only 1 could pass the imperial examination. It could be said that there was at least 1 scholar out of 1,000 people. As for the scholars, there were even fewer. However, almost everyone here was at the level of a scholar. 80% of the young and middle-aged people had the knowledge of a scholar. How could Ning Kaiqian believe this? Furthermore, everyone could keep abreast of what was happening all over the world. How is that possible? Was everyone a deity who could see thousands of miles away? The Empress glanced at Rinpoche. She knew that almost everyone here had gone to school, but she had never heard Rinpoche make such a comparison. Rinpoche laughed. He did understand the examination system in Great Xia. Scholars had a high status, but their knowledge was equivalent to that of a junior high school student, and this was only in terms of ancient books and records. In terms of mathematics, it was equivalent to a primary school graduate. As for physics and chemistry, there was no need to talk about it. As for the scholars, they were at most at the level of high school or junior college. Similarly, this was only in terms of ancient books and records. In terms of mathematics, they were no higher than a junior high school student. As for physics and chemistry, they were equivalent to 0. Of course, they weren't completely useless. At the very least, in terms of reciting poems and soliciting prostitutes in brothels, they were much better than current students. Furthermore, they had their own ideas on how to govern the country. After all, those who could pass the imperial examination were all outstanding people. However, on the whole, they couldn't be compared. You will know in a few days. You will be staying here in the future, and you can go and see for yourself, Rinpoche said casually. No matter how he explained, it would be more useful to let him see for himself. After the meal, Rinpoche brought them to buy 2 sets of clothes and made 2 pairs of glasses for Xi and Jia. After that, they returned home and got busy again. Especially when they saw their daughter-in-law, Rinpoche's parents were grinning from ear to ear. The following day, Rinpoche led everyone around the city. In any case, he didn't need to prepare anything for the wedding as his family had already prepared everything. Ren Wanyin also rushed over from Wuji City with more than 20 winged cavalry warriors. On the day before Rinpoche's wedding, an acquaintance rushed over. Chen Qing. To be honest, Rinpoche had a very good impression of him. At that time, he was still an ordinary person, and Chen Qing and Papa Chen did not let him down. However, he became busier and had too many responsibilities. As a result, he had less contact with Chen Qing. However, the 2 of them still talked on the phone occasionally. As a result, other than his parents, relatives, and friends, only Chen Qing knew that he was getting married here. Brother, I have arrived. Do you want to come out for a drink? Do you want me to hold a bachelor's party for you? Chen Qing, who was on the other end of the phone, had a naughty smile on his face. Rinpoche's expression immediately became very interesting. Not far away, the Empress, who was playing with her phone, immediately pricked up her ears. Another bachelor's party? The Empress's mouth curled into a smile as she looked at Rinpoche. However, there was a dangerous glint in her eyes. Chapter 862. It's been a while. You seem to have lost some weight. You look even more spirited now. Chen Qing laughed heartily as he welcomed Rinpoche. Previously, the 2 of them would occasionally video chat, so she knew about his figure for a period of time. This is... Chun-Ching looked at the delicate, bespectacled lady behind Rinpochian and was slightly puzzled. This wasn't a bride. My sister-in-law. Rinpochian hesitated. The Empress was afraid that Rinpochian would cause trouble again, so she hired a bodyguard. If I'm not married yet, you must introduce your sister-in-law to me. Chun-Ching laughed heartily. Unfortunately, my son is already 10 years old. Let's sit down and talk. Rinpochian smiled. The two of them sat down. Rinpochian looked at Exa, pointed to the side, and said, "Sit down. Don't stand behind me. It's scary." This was a very quiet bar, and there were not many people around. An old folk song was floating in the bar. It sounded faint, but it had a vicissitudes of life, reminding people of the past. I once dreamed of traveling the world with a sword, but I canceled my original plan because I was too fat. Hearing these words made one's heart ache. Beer, then. Give her juice. It had been a long time since Rinpochian drank beer. Chun-Ching took a close look at Rinpochian and sighed. Time really flies. My son is already 10 years old, but you don't seem to have changed much. Is this not a big change? Rinpochian touched his face and that shiny bald head. He recalled that he used to be a little fresh meat. Time is really a butcher's knife. Come on, you have changed a lot. Looking at your face, there are no signs of aging. Look at me. Even my wrinkles have appeared. Chun-Ching jokingly scolded. 12 years had passed on Earth, but only 6 years had passed for Rinpochian. What about Jiangnan? Rinpochian asked with a smile. I'm at home. I still have to accompany my son to do his homework. I'll come over tomorrow morning. This is too realistic. Rinpochian was speechless. After that, the two of them chatted for a long time and sighed over the years. In fact, most of the time, it was Chun-Ching who was sighing. On the contrary, Rinpochian didn't feel much about it. After all, it had only been 6 years. Furthermore, during this period of time, there were many things happening one after another. Dayo's various matters, such as the war with Great Xia, the pacification of Tianjin Basin, and the trip to the 60,000 mountains. More importantly, he had just gotten married, unlike Chun-Ching, whose son was 10 years old. They didn't catch up for a long time, and Rinpochian was talking about. Leukemia drugs had long been on the market. Just like the sobriety medicine, they occupied a large share of the market as soon as they were launched, both domestically and abroad. However, there were already imitations of the hangover medicine, and they were also made with green vines. This was something that could not be avoided. Chin's time, he Chin's a said they. The pharmaceutical. Now, this pharmaceutical factory and laboratory were very famous in the country. The Chin family had also taken advantage of this opportunity to prosper. It could be said that they had made all kinds of connections and had long since left the 3 northeastern provinces. Rinpochian thought for a while and said, I'll give you some herbs and formulas for you to study. The pharmaceutical factory and laboratory could give him 2 to 300 million yuan in dividends every year, which was his biggest source of income besides the interest-free, indefinite loan. Dayo had a lot of drugs with special effects. Bringing 2 that could be developed on Earth would bring the pharmaceutical factory and laboratory to a higher level. Although they could only provide a source now, they might be of great use in a decade or decades when the influence of the pharmaceutical factory and laboratory was greater. The two of them chatted late into the night, and Xianja was holding a beer mug instead of a juice glass. Her face was flushed, and her eyes were glazed over. Rinpochian had no choice but to bring Xianja back. Any later, and he would have to carry her back. She would die. Nothing happened along the way. When they entered the elevator, Xianja, who was blushing, finally asked, Your Highness. Rinpochian turned to look at her. How did your brain become so bright? Xianja blurted out these words out of her mouth. Rinpochian was speechless. Can't we chat? Huh? Looking at Xianja's inquisitive gaze behind her glasses, Rinpochian replied, Probably using love to generate electricity. Rinpochian pondered. Wasn't it for Her Majesty? Otherwise, how could he practice that technique? Otherwise, how could he be so bright? This was all because of his deep love. Xin's eyes flickered a few times. She suppressed her emotions and asked softly, Are we still doing the electric shock experiment? Rinpoche was taken aback when he heard Xin's voice and words. Why did she bring this up? Of course, Rinpoche wanted to say that he definitely wouldn't do it. However, when he saw Xin's calm gaze, he didn't say that word. Do you like the electric shock experiment? Rinpoche subconsciously recalled the scenes from that time. It was like watching a movie in slow motion. Xinja thought about it and answered honestly, I'm a little interested. I think it's interesting. That experiment gave me a different feeling, one that I've never felt before. Of course, Rinpoche knew that it had never happened before, but he really couldn't explain the specifics to Xinja. Besides, Xinja had never come into contact with such things. Of course, there will be more experiments. I'll let you know when the time comes, Rinpoche said. Okay, Xinja responded. Rinpoche rubbed his head. He didn't expect that Xinja, who is usually cold and cheerless, was actually a masochist. He drew an equal line with Ning Kai-chen. Forget it. It was a pleasure to help others. You don't have to praise me for doing a good deed. The next day was the wedding. Rinpoche was manipulated like a puppet for a long time before he went to fetch the bride. As soon as he got out of the car, Rinwanyin came over and asked with a smile, Are you nervous? Rinpoche gave him a slap on the head. He wasn't nervous, but he felt that it was quite fresh. Even though this was his second marriage, it was still his second. However, he was the one who was fetched the last time. He turned to look behind him. Chen Qing, Rinwanyin, Ding Jie, and the 10-winged cavalry warriors were all there. He nodded with satisfaction. He was considered strong in this aspect. Go upstairs. When they reached the floor, Rinpoche knocked on the door, but there was no response. Rinpoche twisted the doorknob, but it was locked from the inside. I have to open the door first, right? Rinpoche suddenly laughed. Under normal circumstances, he should have used a red packet to knock on the door, right? However, Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were inside, so the red packet was definitely useless. Rinpoche took out a bag from behind his waist and said, White Rabbit creamy candies. Who wants them? Chapter 863. After Rinpoche shouted, he heard an ah, followed by another ah, followed by the sound of bodies colliding. Then, there was no more movement. Rinpoche was shocked. Even the White Rabbit creamy candy didn't work. Wine chocolate. Who wants it? There was no sound. Rinpoche was finally sure that his ultimate move wasn't going to work today. What do you want? Rinpoche shouted at the door. If an ordinary person got married, this place would definitely be used to block red packets. However, the people inside were definitely not playing this game. Give us a wonderful performance. This voice sounded a little mature and sounded like it was from Jiangnan. Thinking about it, it should be from Jiangnan. Perform what? Crush a rock on the chest? Rinpoche rolled his eyes. This was something he could still try. In fact, an electric drill could also be performed, but he reckoned that no one would dare to watch. I want to see you drink the water of life without getting drunk. Rinpoche's eyes widened. Water of life? 1,000 cups without getting drunk? Which bastard? You want me to perform 1,000 cups of 96 degrees vodka without getting drunk? Can I still live after drinking it? Judging from the purposeful voice, it was either Qing Yuan or Hong Yuan. It was more likely to be Qing Yuan. Rinpoche took 2 steps back, waved his head at the winged cavalry warriors behind him, and said, Go, tear down the door. The cameraman immediately went numb. Tear down the door? Tear down the door at a wedding? Or were they wrong? After thinking about it carefully, they still felt that they might have misunderstood. No matter what, there was no need to tear down the door on such a joyous occasion. They had never seen a wedding like this. 10 winged cavalry warriors laughed merrily as they blocked the corridor and formed a circle. Old man gang, 2 sounds. In fact, it was rock, paper, scissors, but they called it old gang. Old gang, old gang, old gang. Rinpoche's face twitched a few times. 10 people playing rock, paper, scissors together. Were they trying to guess that it would be next year? At this moment, a miracle happened. The 10 men laughed together, and one of the winged cavalry warriors was kicked out of the crowd. Go! Rinpoche pointed at the new security door in front. Should I demolish it from the inside or from the outside? Since the winged cavalry warrior had been kicked out, he was willing to concede defeat and spoke rather heroically. Outwards! All right, watch me. That winged cavalry warrior clenched his fists and made a cracking sound. Then he smashed his fists on both sides of the door. Rinpoche felt the entire floor shake. Aya! A scream came from the other side of the door. It sounded like someone from Jiangnan. 2 cracks appeared on the walls on both sides of the door. The places where the fists hit had been pierced through, and the figures inside could be seen. The eyes of the cameraman behind them were wide open. Although many people had gained a lot of strength after cultivating the 15th broadcast Qigong to be able to punch through someone's body with a single punch. Not to mention how much strength was required. Was his hand all right? However, what happened next caught them off guard. The security door opened quickly, and a lady stepped forward. She reached out and pressed down on the bald head of the winged cavalry warrior. Bang! The entire floor shook again. The tiles on the floor of the corridor were all cracked open, and half of the winged cavalry warrior's head was pressed in. Bang! The security door was slammed shut again. Only a bunch of people were left staring at each other. Should we call an ambulance? The cameraman's legs and stomachs were trembling. They had never seen such a situation during a wedding reception. How much hatred did they have? Swoosh! The winged cavalry warrior propped himself up with both hands, pulled his head out, and shook it, causing his nose to bleed. Rinpoche's head was throbbing. That was Xianja. Given her character, she definitely wouldn't do such a thing under such circumstances. Needless to say, it must have been the Empress's instructions. Rinpoche looked at the 2 holes on the side of the door. One of them was just enough for him to put his hand in to open the door. They probably wouldn't hit him, right? Rinpoche laughed, put his hand in through the hole, and was about to open the door. Then he was slapped on the back of his hand. The sound was loud and clear, as if someone had slapped him hard in the face. It's swollen. Rinpoche stood outside the door with a solemn look on his face. It's swollen, Xianja said from inside. Aya, it's really swollen. This was Qing Yuan's voice. Rinpoche silently withdrew his hand. It was indeed swollen like a hoof. It was a familiar formula and smell. Needless to say, it was the Empress. Brother. Rinwanyan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He squeezed past Rinpoche and stuffed a thick stack of red packets into his hand. Then a low voice came from inside. Do you want to open the door? It was Jiangnan's voice. After all, she didn't understand the situation and didn't dare to go overboard. No way. This time, it was the Empress's voice, and she didn't try to hide it at all. It seemed like using force wouldn't work, and the red packet method wouldn't work either. They still had to use their wits. Tell me, what do you want? Draw a line. Don't mention the water of life. Do you dare to let me drink it? Rinpoche said. We dare. Forget it. Let's not talk about the water of life. It's not easy for us to get married, and it's not easy for everyone. Let's do something practical. It's already the 2nd time. Cough, that time, it was just the 2 of us and no one else. It was our first marriage, so let's talk properly. Can't we have a chat? Rinpoche coughed dryly. Chen Qing, Run Wanyin, and the rest of the cameramen were all embarrassed. How could they film the process of picking up the bride for others to see? Now, the wedding planner had already started to suspect that they were here to cause trouble. Rinpoche glared at Chen Qing fiercely. Based on this tormenting method, it must have been Zhang Nan who suggested it first, and then the Empress was moved. Otherwise, the Empress definitely wouldn't know about these messy things. Why don't I sing a wet song for all of you? Rinpoche decided to choose a less difficult one. Bright moonlight in front of the bed, 2 pairs of shoes on the floor. How fitting would that be? Let's rehearse our lines. You have to rehearse everyone's lines. If we are satisfied, open the door, Jiang Nan's voice sounded. Rinpoche glared, at Chun-Ching again. Jiang should be 35 or 36 years old now. Why didn't she look dignified at all? Okay. Rinpoche's face was full of concentration as he waited to see what kind of tricks they were up to. Shall we begin? Jiang Nin shouted from inside the house. Let's begin. You are here? Rinpoche thought for a while. What did these 3 words mean? Then he probed. I am here. You shouldn't have come. Rinpoche was speechless. Nonsense. If I didn't come, where would I go? However, Rinpoche knew that this was Gulong Feng. Jiang Nan's lines were pretty good. But I'm still here. Since you are here, you have to leave the things behind. Rinpoche turned his head and looked at Chun-Ching. His eyes were filled with questions. What things? However, he followed along and said, I can leave the things behind, but I have to bring the person with me. Chun-Ching spread his hands. How would I know what things are? Rinpoche, that's your wife. Bring the things over first. Jiang Nan's voice sounded. Rinpoche thought for a while, grabbed a bunch of white rabbit creamy candies, and threw them in. Something's not right. Rinpoche took a stack of red packets from Renwan Yin and stuffed them in. It's still not right. Rinpoche was about to go crazy. God knows what they want. Leave the 6 flavor Remania pills behind. Rinpoche almost vomited blood. Where am I going to get the 6 flavor Remania pills for you? Furthermore, who would bring a box of 6 flavor Remania pills to a wedding? Jiang Nan's laughter could be heard from inside the house. Change the person. Change the person. Let's just say that he is too much. This time, it was a voice that was pinching its throat. Orioles, swallows, green, red. Everywhere is harmonious and harmonious. Your Highness, you can pass by matching the second half of the couplet. Rinpoche felt that it sounded familiar. He turned his head to look at the people behind him and saw that they were all at a loss. Rinpoche slapped his head. It was fine if he couldn't remember. After all, he was a famous teacher in a mountain village. How could he be stumped by this? He immediately said, flowers, leaves blooming and falling year after year, day after day, day after night. Qing Yuan stuck out her tongue in the room and exclaimed happily, You passed, you passed. In the movie, it was rain, wind, flowers, leaves, leaves, year after year, day after day. The reason why she came up with this couplet was because of the phrase year after year, day after day, day after day. Even though she didn't know any poems or couplets, she knew that even though Rinpoche's answer was slightly different, it was almost the same. As such, she was rather happy. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.